The wind across the steppe does not remember the battles it has seen, it only knows how to scatter the falling snow. Listen to the quiet. It is a vast, unending silence that stretches out over the frozen earth, unbroken by the horizon, untouched by the sky. In this deep winter, the world has lost its color. There is only the blinding, quiet white of the snowdrifts, and the soft, gray veil of the twilight falling gently over the plains. Far to the east, a great and terrible storm has finally broken. The ruins of a city, a place of iron and fire, have fallen completely silent under the ice. But we will not linger there. The echoes of that deep sorrow are fading now, swallowed by the vastness of the snow. Instead, we follow the shadows that move slowly away from the ruins. We follow the weary men who are walking back into the white void. They are just boys, really, and tired men in heavy coats, moving like ghosts through a landscape that seems to have no end. The snow falls around them, a gentle, rhythmic dusting that settles on their shoulders, on the brims of their caps, and on the woolen scarves wrapped tightly across their faces. With every step, there is only the soft, rhythmic crunch of frozen boots against the crust of the snow. Crunch. Crunch. A lullaby of exhaustion. If you were to walk beside them, you would not see fierce soldiers. You would see men whose eyes are heavy with sleep, men who are dreaming while still on their feet. Their hands are tucked deep into their pockets, searching for any lingering trace of warmth. And inside those pockets, close to their beating hearts, lie the only things that truly matter out here in the frozen dark. Not medals. Not maps. But pieces of paper. Folded again and again until the creases are soft and tearing, these letters are the tethers that keep these men anchored to the earth. When the night falls, and the winds finally settle into a quiet, whispering breeze, the men huddle together in whatever shelter they can find, a hollow in the earth, the lee of a ruined wall, or simply beneath the low branches of a dark pine tree. They light small, trembling fires. The flames are no bigger than a candle's glow, fragile and shivering in the dark, but to the men gathered around them, they are the center of the universe. By the light of one of these tiny, flickering embers, a young man pulls his hands from his gloves. His fingers are stiff, blue with the cold, but he handles the thin paper with the utmost reverence, as if holding a brittle autumn leaf. He reads the words written by his wife, far away in a village where the snow falls softly on intact roofs, where a fire burns warmly in an iron stove. He reads her words in silence, mouthing the syllables to himself. She tells him of the dog barking at the neighbor's cart, of the jar of preserves she has saved for his return, of the way the frost creeps up the edges of their bedroom window. She does not write of grand victories or empires. She writes of the hearth. She writes of the scent of baking bread. As he reads, a single, warm tear escapes the corner of his eye, freezing almost instantly on his cheek. He does not wipe it away. In his mind, he is no longer sitting in the bitter snow of the Ukrainian steppe. He is sitting in his own kitchen, a woolen blanket draped over his knees, listening to the kettle whistle. He breathes in the memory, holding it in his lungs like a precious breath of life, before carefully folding the paper and returning it to the pocket above his heart. Just a few miles away, across the same silent, rolling expanse of snow, another group of men sits huddled in the dark. They wear different coats, and they speak a different language, but under the freezing stars, they are exactly the same. They are the pursuers, the ones pressing westward, but they are just as weary, just as numb. They share a single, dented tin cup of hot tea, passing it from one pair of trembling hands to the next. The middle of the cup is burning hot against their lips, a beautiful, agonizing reminder that they are still alive. They hold the cup for an extra second, just to feel the heat radiating into their palms, before passing it on to their brother beside them. One of them, a boy with soot on his chin and frost thick in his eyebrows, looks up at the night sky. The clouds have parted, revealing a sweeping river of stars, diamond bright and piercingly cold. He remembers standing on the porch of his childhood home, looking up at these very same stars alongside his father. He remembers the smell of the pine logs stacked by the door, the soft, familiar sound of his mother humming as she swept the floorboards. He pulls a small, stubby pencil from his coat. The wood is chewed at the end, the lead dull. On the back of a torn wrapper, using his knee as a desk, he begins to write in the faint, silvery moonlight. "Mama," he writes, his handwriting shaky from the cold. "The winter here is so big. I cannot describe it to you. It is like the whole world has been covered in a white sheet, waiting for the spring. I am safe. I am warm enough. Do not worry for me. Please, keep the extra blanket on my bed. I dream of coming home and sleeping for a very long time. I miss the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway." He pauses, watching his breath form a faint white cloud that drifts slowly upward, dissolving into the freezing air. Out here, the breath of men is the only proof they exist at all. A fragile, warm mist in an ocean of ice. There is a profound loneliness in this landscape. The trees, stripped of their leaves, stand like silent sentinels watching the slow procession of ghosts beneath them. Every branch is coated in a delicate layer of rime, sparkling softly when the moonlight catches it. The beauty of it is almost heartbreaking. It is a pure, sleeping world, entirely indifferent to the exhaustion of the men who wander across its surface. Occasionally, the men come across the hollowed shells of forgotten villages. The houses are dark, their thatch roofs heavy with snow, their windows like dark, empty eyes. There is no smoke rising from the chimneys. The people who lived here have long since gathered their children and vanished into the woods, leaving behind only the quiet echoes of a simpler time. A squad of weary soldiers steps inside one of these abandoned homes, seeking refuge from the biting wind. The door hangs slightly off its hinges, creaking a slow, sad song as it swings in the breeze. Inside, the air is stale and freezing, but it is out of the wind. They collapse onto the wooden floorboards, too tired to speak, too tired to even take off their packs. They simply lay their heads against their canvas bags, closing their eyes against the dark. One soldier notices a small, hand-carved wooden toy resting in the corner of the room. A little wooden horse, worn smooth by the hands of a child. He crawls over to it, his movements slow and heavy, and picks it up. He traces the carved mane with his thumb. For a fleeting moment, the war disappears entirely. He is a father again, remembering the weight of his own child sitting on his knee. He places the wooden horse gently inside his coat, wrapping it in a spare pair of woolen socks, keeping it safe. A small talisman of innocence carried into the dark. As the night deepens, the wind begins to lull, settling into a soft, melodic hum that sweeps across the snowdrifts. It is a soothing sound, like the earth itself is breathing a long, slow sigh. The temperature drops further, freezing the snow into a hard, crystalline crust that glitters faintly in the dark. The soldiers, both the ones retreating and the ones following, finally succumb to the heavy pull of sleep. They huddle tightly against one another, forming small islands of shared body heat in the vast, freezing ocean of the steppe. They share blankets, draping arms over shoulders, their breaths sinking into a single, quiet rhythm. In their dreams, they are no longer cold. In their dreams, the snow has melted away, revealing soft, green grass. They are sitting in sunlit gardens, drinking cool water from clear streams. They hear the voices of their wives, their mothers, their children, calling them in for supper. The smell of roasted potatoes and warm butter fills the air. They are safe. They are home. The snow begins to fall again. Large, soft flakes drift down from the star-studded sky, twirling lazily in the quiet air. They land gently on the sleeping men, covering their coats in a fresh layer of pure, white lace. Slowly, the snow fills in the footprints they left behind, smoothing out the jagged lines of their march, erasing the scars upon the earth. If you look out over the plains now, you would not see armies. You would only see the gentle rolling hills of snow, glowing faintly under the moon. You would only hear the soft, whispering hush of the winter night, promising rest, promising a moment of peace. The men sleep on, wrapped in the silent, deep snow. They are held in the quiet embrace of the winter, their fears and their sorrows temporarily frozen, tucked away in the pockets of their heavy coats, resting gently over their slowly beating hearts. Tomorrow will come, and they will walk again, but for now, there is only the peaceful, deep slumber. Only the quiet breathing in the dark. Only the falling snow, whispering to the earth, "Hush, hush, sleep now, sleep." There is a rhythm to walking when all other thought has faded away, a slow, heavy heartbeat pressed into the frozen earth. The sun hangs low and pale behind the gray clouds, casting a weak, silvery light over the endless steppe. It is sinking toward the west, and the men are following it. They are moving away from the rising sun, away from the fierce storms that broke their lines in the east. They are a long, thin ribbon of field gray, winding slowly across an ocean of white. If you were to watch them from a distance, they would not look like an army. They look like a procession of tired shadows, drifting quietly through a dream they cannot wake from. Listen to the sound they make. It is not the sharp, crisp marching of parades. It is a dull, shuffling murmur. Thousands of boots dragging through the deep drifts. The squeak of stiff, freezing leather. The soft clinking of tin cups swinging gently against canvas bread bags. This is the only music of the retreat. It is a lullaby of sheer endurance, playing over and over, mile after mile. Step. Breathe. Step. Breathe. It is a simple, hypnotic rhythm that lulls the mind to sleep, even as the body keeps moving. For these men, the world has shrunk. It is no longer a world of nations, or borders, or grand strategies drawn on vast, paper maps. The world is only the distance between themselves and the man walking directly in front of them. They stare at the worn heels of the boots ahead, watching them rise and fall, using that motion to pull themselves forward. If the boots ahead keep moving, they keep moving. If the boots ahead stop, they stop. Thought requires energy, and out here in the bitter cold, energy is too precious to waste on remembering why they came to this empty place. The grand speeches they heard months ago have been blown away by the winter wind. The flags are just heavy, frozen cloth. All that remains is the desperate, quiet need to keep walking. To not be left behind in the snow. In the middle of the column, a young soldier named Elias leans heavily on a makeshift walking stick, a broken branch he pulled from a dead pine tree. His other arm is draped over the shoulder of an older man, a quiet baker from a town near the mountains. They do not speak. The cold steals the breath from your lungs if you open your mouth too wide. But the older man adjusts his gait, slowing his own steps to match the painful limp of the boy beside him. Every time Elias stumbles, the older man's grip tightens, silently saying, "I have you. You will not fall." It is a small, invisible act of love, hidden beneath layers of stiff wool and frost. It is the kind of quiet heroism that goes entirely unnoticed by history, but it is the only thing keeping them alive. They reach a slight bend in the road, where the wind has swept the snow away, leaving a patch of dark, hard ice. The older man gently guides Elias around it, ensuring his unsteady feet find purchase. When they pause for a brief moment to catch their breath, the older man reaches into his deep pocket. He pulls out a piece of dark bread. It is frozen solid, as hard as the stones on the road. He breaks it in half by striking it against the butt of his rifle, a dull, wooden thud in the quiet air. He hands the larger piece to the boy. Elias takes it with trembling, mittened hands. He holds it in his mouth, letting the warmth of his tongue slowly thaw the edges until he can finally chew. It tastes of nothing but dust and cold, but in this hollow landscape, it is a feast. They share a look, their eyes visible beneath the thick wraps of their scarves. A look of profound, shared understanding. We are still here. We are still breathing. Further down the line, a lieutenant walks with his head bowed. He holds a small, brass compass in his palm. The glass is frosted over, and he has to wipe it with his thumb to see the tiny, trembling needle. It points stubbornly away from them, toward the east they have left behind. But he is not looking at the north or the east. He is looking at the little painted W. West. In military terms, it is the direction of retreat. But to the tired men walking behind him, west has lost its strategic meaning. West simply means away. West means closer to the setting sun. West means, perhaps, if they walk long enough, they might stumble out of this white nightmare and find the warm, lit windows of home. The compass is not a tool of war anymore. It is a magic talisman pointing toward a gentle bed, a thick quilt, and a quiet room. As the afternoon deepens, the sky turns the color of bruised lavender, and the temperature begins to drop even further. The moisture from their breath freezes onto their collars, forming delicate, heavy pearls of ice. The landscape around them is vast and completely indifferent. Rolling plains of snow stretch out to the horizon, dotted only by the occasional, lonely silhouette of a skeletal tree or a half-buried wooden fence. The beauty of the winter steppe is absolute, but it is a cold, sleeping beauty. It offers no comfort, only silence. Walking beside the men are the horses. Large, gentle beasts from the farmlands of Europe, brought to this alien, frozen place to pull the heavy wooden sleds of supplies and the wounded. The horses are just as weary as the men. Their heads hang low, their large, dark eyes blinking slowly against the stinging snow. Their coats are thick with frost, and every breath they take billows out like thick white smoke. A soldier walking beside one of the sleds reaches out and rests his hand on the horse's flank. He can feel the heat of the animal radiating through his thin glove. He strokes the coarse hair gently. "Good boy," the soldier whispers, his voice barely carrying over the wind. "Just a little further." The horse snorts softly, acknowledging the touch. For a few minutes, the soldier simply walks with his hand resting on the animal, drawing comfort from the steady, rhythmic movement of its muscles. In this desolate place, the shared warmth between a tired man and a tired beast is a profound, comforting grace. They are both far from green pastures, both caught in a storm they did not ask for, relying entirely on each other to see the morning. There is a strange, numb peace that comes over a person when they have walked for days on end. The sharp edges of fear begin to dull. The panic of the front lines, the roar of the artillery, all of it fades away, replaced by the simple, singular focus of placing one foot in front of the other. The mind detaches from the aching body and begins to wander. It drifts back to soft memories, playing them like quiet movies behind half-closed eyelids. A man with frostbitten cheeks remembers the smell of pine needles in a warm parlor on Christmas Eve. He remembers the specific way his mother's hands looked as she folded the evening newspaper. Another man, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his pack, hums a silent, broken melody in his head. It is the song he used to dance to in a crowded, brightly lit hall, years before the world turned gray. He tries to remember the face of the girl he danced with, the color of her dress. The memory is slippery, fading in and out like a radio station losing its signal, but the attempt to hold onto it keeps him moving. It is a small, private rebellion against the erasing power of the cold. Twilight finally surrenders to the night. The sky becomes a deep, bruised purple, and the stars begin to prick through the clouds, hard and bright. The wind settles into a low, mournful sigh that sweeps across the snow. The column of men begins to slow, sensing the coming darkness. They know they must find shelter soon, or the night will simply close over them and never let them go. They spot the dark outlines of a ruined barn in the distance. Its roof has partially collapsed, and the wooden walls are full of gaps, but it is enough. It is a sanctuary. As they approach, the dragging of their boots seems to grow a little heavier, as if the mere sight of rest has drained the last reserves of their strength. They file inside, out of the cutting wind. The interior of the barn smells of old hay, dry dust, and the deep, abiding scent of the cold earth. They collapse against the walls, sinking into the soft, scattered straw. There is no chatter. There are no orders shouted. They simply let go. Packs hit the floorboards with soft thuds. Rifles are leaned against the ancient, silvered wood. The older man helps the boy, Elias, sit down gently, wrapping a thick, scratchy blanket tightly around his shivering shoulders. He sits beside him, their arms touching, sharing the fragile warmth of their tired bodies. Some of the men do not even wait to eat. They pull their caps down over their eyes, tuck their frozen hands under their armpits, and drift instantly into a heavy, dreamless sleep. Others sit in the dark, their eyes open, staring at the moonlight filtering through the cracks in the roof. They listen to the wind howling softly outside, a sound that makes the small, protected space inside the barn feel infinitely precious. A young soldier fumbles with a small, leather pouch in his lap. By the faint, silvery light of the moon, he pulls out a photograph. It is creased and worn, the edges soft from being held 1,000 times. It shows a woman standing in front of a modest stone house, squinting slightly into the sun. He doesn't need the light to see her face, he has memorized every line, every shadow. He traces her smile with a dirty, frostbitten thumb. He doesn't feel sadness in this moment. He feels a strange, profound gratitude. He is alive, and she is waiting. That is all that matters. He presses the paper to his cracked lips, a silent, reverent kiss, before tucking it safely back against his chest. The night deepens, wrapping the ruined barn in a thick, protective blanket of dark. The breathing of the men slows, settling into a collective, rhythmic sigh. The long, quiet retreat has paused. For a few hours, they do not have to walk. They do not have to endure. They can simply rest. The war has faded into the vast, snowy distance, leaving only the quiet miracle of sleep. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, large, soft flakes that drift lazily through the quiet air. They land on the roof of the barn, on the abandoned road, covering the millions of footsteps left behind. The snow covers the tracks, smoothing out the earth, whispering to the night that all is calm. It is a gentle, forgiving snow. It blankets the tired world in pure white, offering a soft, endless peace until the morning comes. Hush now. The walking is done for today. Let the heavy eyes close. Let the quiet darkness hold you. Sleep. Just sleep. There is a softness in the air today, a quiet promise whispered by the wind that the long, dark winter might finally be breaking. Look out across the rolling, white ocean of the steppe. The sky above is no longer the heavy, crushing gray of the deep freeze. It has thinned into a pale, milky blue, and the sun, hanging like a delicate silver coin, casts a light that feels just a fraction warmer against a frostbitten cheek. The snow is still deep, still endless, but the harsh, biting edge of the wind has softened into a gentle breeze. It is a flicker of false spring, a delicate illusion that warms not just the frozen earth, but the tired hearts of the men walking across it. They are moving westward, a long, winding river of men wrapped in heavy, quilted coats and thick felt boots. They are the pursuers, the tide rolling back across the plains. But if you watch their faces, you will not see the fierce, bright masks of conquerors. You will see the quiet, numb relief of survivors. They have walked through the fires of the ruined city on the great river, and they have emerged into this vast, silent snowscape. And for the first time in an eternity, they are walking toward the setting sun. They are walking toward home. Listen to the muffled rhythm of their footsteps. It is a slow, steady crunching in the snow, a softer sound than the marching of weeks past. There is a lightness to their heavy boots today. It is born of a fragile, quiet hope that has begun to take root in their chests. It is a dangerous thing to hope out here in the vastness of the war, but they cannot help it. The lines have moved. The shadows ahead of them are retreating. And as they walk through the abandoned, snowy fields, a silent thought passes from man to man, unspoken but deeply felt. Perhaps this is the end. Perhaps we only have a little further to go. In the center of the column walks a young man named Leviticus. He is barely 20, though the frost in his eyebrows and the hollows of his cheeks make him look like an old man. He wears a thick, knitted woolen scarf wrapped twice around his neck. It is a faded, muted red, spawned from the wool of his mother's own sheep, far away in a village surrounded by quiet birch forests. As he walks, he reaches up with a mittened hand and gently presses the wool to his chin. It smells faintly of wood smoke and old cedar, a scent that instantly transports him away from the endless white plains. When Lev closes his eyes for a brief, walking moment, he does not see the snowy horizon. He sees the wooden gate of his family's home. He sees the heavy, iron latch, feels the smooth, worn wood under his palm. He imagines pushing it open, hearing its familiar, comforting creak. He imagines walking up the path, shaking the snow from his boots on the front step, and opening the door to the smell of boiling potatoes and warm bread. This beautiful, aching daydream is the fuel that keeps his legs moving. It is a dream shared by every man walking beside him, a collective, silent prayer woven into the cold air with every breath they take. As the afternoon shadows begin to stretch and turn a deep, bruised lavender against the snow, the column slowly comes to a halt. They have reached a small grove of silver birch trees, standing like quiet, pale guardians in a hollow of the land. The trees offer a natural windbreak, a place of sanctuary. The men do not need orders to know it is time to rest. They simply begin to disperse among the slender, white trunks, their movements slow and heavy with exhaustion. Here, in the shelter of the trees, the ritual of the evening begins. It is a gentle, quiet domesticity transplanted into the wild snow. Men kneel in the drifts, using their gloved hands to clear away the top layers of snow, revealing the dark, frozen earth beneath. They gather small, fallen twigs, peeling strips of the papery birch bark that shed like delicate parchment. Soon, tiny, glowing embers begin to dot the twilight. They are small, hidden campfires, kept low so as not to draw eyes from the dark horizon, but they are enough. The flames dance and shiver, casting a warm, amber glow on the faces of the men gathered around them. The light softens their hardened features, smoothing away the lines of worry and fatigue, returning them to the boys and fathers they were before the world broke apart. Around one of these small, crackling fires, a group of 4 men sits shoulder to shoulder. They are sharing a single, battered tin kettle. They have packed it tight with clean, white snow and placed it carefully over the heat. They watch it with the reverent patience of men who have nothing else in the world to do but wait for warmth. As the snow melts and the water begins to boil, a soft, white plume of steam rises into the freezing air, mingling with the smoke of the birch wood. One of the men, an older sergeant with kind, tired eyes, reaches deep into his canvas bag. He pulls out a small, folded piece of wax paper. Inside is a treasure beyond measure, a pinch of dark, dry tea leaves. He handles them as if they were gold dust. With painstaking care, he sprinkles the leaves into the boiling water. The water darkens, blooming into a rich, deep amber, and a faint, bitter, beautiful aroma fills the small space around the fire. They have only 1 tin mug between them. The sergeant pours the steaming liquid into the cup and hands it to the youngest boy in their circle. The boy takes it with both hands, letting the burning heat of the metal seep through his thin gloves and into his frozen palms. He brings it to his face, closing his eyes as the fragrant steam washes over his cheeks. He takes a slow, careful sip. It is thin, mostly water, but it tastes of life. It tastes of a world where things are warm and safe. He holds the hot liquid in his mouth for a moment before swallowing, feeling the warmth travel down into his chest, melting the ice that has gathered around his heart. He passes the cup to Lev, who takes it with a quiet nod of thanks. As the mug makes its slow, sacred circle around the fire, a profound silence falls over the men. It is not the tense, watchful silence of the front lines. It is a heavy, comfortable quiet. It is the silence of shared survival, of a fragile peace stolen from the jaws of the winter. In this quiet, the older sergeant pulls a small, blocky piece of pine from his pocket, along with a short, dull knife. He begins to carve. He does not look at what he is doing. His hands know the motions by heart. He is carving a small, wooden bird. As the shavings fall like snow onto his lap, he thinks of his little girl, sleeping in a trundle bed hundreds of miles away. He imagines her waking up, finding this little wooden bird resting on her pillow. He imagines the sound of her laugh, a sound he has not heard in 2 years, a sound that rings clearer in his memory than any noise of the war. He shaves a delicate sliver from the wood, shaping a wing, pouring all his unspoken love into the tiny, inanimate block. As the tea is finished and the stars begin to emerge, piercing the velvet sky like shards of diamonds, a sound begins to rise from the next fire over. It starts as a low, humming vibration in the chest, a deep, resonant note that hangs in the cold air. Another voice joins it, finding a soft, melancholic harmony. It is a song from the old country, a slow, winding folk melody about a river flowing under the ice, about a maiden waiting by a window. The men do not sing loudly. They sing in a hushed, breathy chorus, their voices blending with the whispering wind in the birch branches. The song drifts through the grove, wrapping around the trees, floating over the snowdrifts. It is a lullaby for the tired earth, a gentle weeping turned into music. Even those who do not sing close their eyes and listen, letting the melody wash over them. The song speaks of everything they have lost, and everything they are walking toward. It speaks of the deep, unbreakable roots of their homes, calling them back. By the light of the dying embers, a medic sits a little apart from the group. He has an old, leather-bound notebook balanced on his knees, and a stub of a pencil pinched between his stiff fingers. The paper is wrinkled from the damp, but he writes with a desperate, quiet focus. "My dearest," he writes, his handwriting small and cramped. "The air changed today. For a moment, when the sun caught the snow, it looked like the frost was melting. It is a trick of the light, I know, but it made my heart ache. We are moving forward now. Every step takes me closer to the sun, and closer to you. The boys are singing tonight. It sounds like the choir in our old church. I keep thinking of the garden out back. I wonder if the snowdrops will bloom before I get there. Please, keep the lamp near the window. I am following its light, even when I cannot see it. I am coming home." He closes the notebook gently, tying the leather strap around it. He tucks it deep inside his coat, right against his ribs, keeping his words warm. The fires burn down to soft, glowing rubies in the ash. The song fades into a final, lingering hum, eventually giving way entirely to the absolute silence of the deep night. The men pull their greatcoats tightly around themselves, curling into the snow like children, drawing warmth from the earth and from each other. Above them, the sky begins to release a slow, gentle flurry of snow. The flakes drift down through the bare branches of the birch trees, twirling like tiny, weightless feathers. They land softly on the shoulders of the sleeping men, on the brims of their caps, on the ashes of their small fires. It is a quiet, forgiving snow. It covers the landscape in a fresh, pure blanket, hiding the footprints, hiding the war, leaving only the beautiful, sleeping stillness. Here, in the heart of the winter woods, under the watchful eyes of the stars, there is a flicker of false spring. It is not in the warmth of the air, but in the quiet, steady beating of their hearts. They sleep deeply, wrapped in the delicate, beautiful dream of peace. They dream of melting rivers, of green shoots pushing through the dark soil, of warm hands holding theirs. The night is long, and the true spring is still far away, but for tonight, they are safe. For tonight, they are hopeful. For tonight, they simply sleep, carried gently on the soft, whispering breath of the snowy earth. Rest now. Let the gentle dream hold you. All is quiet. All is still. Through the thick, curling frost of a kitchen window, the world outside is nothing but moving shadows and the heavy, rhythmic crunch of boots on the ice. Listen to the quiet of the house. It is a different kind of silence than the vast, empty stillness of the steppe. This is a held breath. It is a silence made of listening, of waiting, of hearts beating softly in the dim light of closed rooms. The village sits nestled on the banks of a great, wide river. In the summer, this water sings over smooth stones and carries the reflection of the willow trees. But now, in the deep grip of the winter, the river is frozen solid. It has become a road of thick, white ice, a pathway for the shifting tides of the world. For the people who live in these small, wooden houses, the war is not a line on a map. It is not a grand strategy or a victory march. It is simply a storm that blows back and forth across their doorsteps. It is the rumble of heavy wheels shaking the dust from the rafters. It is the sound of footsteps, thousands upon thousands of footsteps, crossing the frozen river in the dark. Behind the heavy wooden doors, life has shrunk to the size of a single room. In a low, shadowed cottage near the riverbank, an old woman named Oksana kneels on the earthen floor of her root cellar. The air down here is damp and smells richly of the dark soil, of old pine boards, and of the deep, sleeping earth. She moves with practiced, quiet grace. Her hands, worn and lined like the bark of the ancient oak trees in the forest, are busy with a sacred task. She is wrapping a handful of potatoes in a thick, woolen cloth. To kings and generals, a potato is nothing. But here, in the cold and the dark, these rough, brown stones of the earth are life itself. She carefully places them into a hollow beneath the floorboards, nestled next to a small, precious glass jar half filled with coarse flour. She works by touch, the cellar too dark for even a candle, her fingers reading the shapes of her meager winter rations. She covers the hollow with a heavy plank, sweeping a layer of loose earth over it so that it perfectly matches the rest of the floor. It is an act of quiet, desperate defiance. She does not weep. She does not tremble. She simply prepares. She has seen the armies march east, and now she hears them marching west. She knows that whoever knocks on the door, the winter does not care. The winter demands food, and she will make sure her family has enough to see the spring. She pats the earth flat, whispering a soft, silent blessing over the hidden floorboard, before slowly climbing the wooden ladder back into the house. Above her, in the main room, the stove is cold. They dare not light a fire. A fire means smoke rising from the chimney, and smoke means a warm house, and a warm house draws the tired, freezing men who are wandering out in the snow. So, the family endures the cold. A mother sits in the corner of the room, nestled on a low bed. She has gathered her two young children into her arms, pulling a mountain of heavy, patchwork quilts over them until they are nothing but a tangle of limbs and soft, breathing warmth. She rocks them gently, a slow, rhythmic swaying that matches the beating of her own heart. Outside, a heavy truck rumbles past on the frozen road. The wooden walls of the house vibrate slightly, and the window panes rattle in their frames. The youngest child, a little boy with a shock of dark hair, tenses in her arms, his wide eyes catching the faint moonlight filtering through the frost. "Hush now, little bird," the mother whispers, her lips resting softly against his forehead. It is only the wind. Just the heavy winter wind moving through the trees. She begins to tell them a story, keeping her voice to a soft, melodic murmur. She does not tell them of soldiers or tanks or the shifting lines of the front. She tells them a fairy tale about a great, sleeping bear who guards the forest. She tells them how the bear rests in his deep, warm cave, covered in soft moss, waiting for the snowdrops to push through the ice. Her voice is a blanket, thick and comforting, wrapping around the children and insulating them from the harsh reality outside the glass. The children listen, their breathing slowly deepening, lulled by the familiar cadence of their mother's voice and the steady, radiating heat of her body. In her arms, they are safe. In her arms, the war does not exist. If you step close to the window and look through the intricate, fern-like patterns of the ice, you can see the river. The moonlight paints the frozen surface in strokes of pale silver and deep, charcoal shadows. And there, moving across the ice, are the men. They walk in long, broken lines. Their heads are bowed against the wind. From behind the glass, you cannot see the insignias on their collars or the shape of their helmets. You cannot tell if they are the retreating forces or the advancing ones. To the weary eyes of the villagers, they are all the same. They are just cold, exhausted boys, bundled in rags, dragging their feet over the slippery ice. A woman stands by her window in a house further up the bank, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. She watches a young soldier slip on a patch of clear ice and fall hard onto his knees. He stays there for a long moment, his head resting against the frozen river, as if he simply cannot find the strength to stand back up. The woman's hand twitches. Her first, beautiful instinct is to open the door, to rush out with a cup of hot water, to help the boy to his feet and offer him a chair by the hearth. It is the instinct of a mother, of a human being witnessing suffering. But she stays her hand. She rests her palm flat against the freezing glass. She knows she cannot open the door. To open the door is to invite the storm inside. She watches, her heart aching with a quiet, helpless sorrow, until another shadow steps out of the line, grabs the fallen boy by the arm, and hauls him upright. The two figures lean against each other and continue their slow, agonizing march into the dark. The woman closes her eyes and breathes a soft, shaky sigh, a prayer for a boy whose name she will never know, walking on a river that will eventually melt and wash all these footprints away. In a small room tucked beneath the eaves of an old farmhouse, a young girl sits at a wooden table. She has pulled the thick curtains tightly shut, ensuring not a single sliver of light escapes into the night. On the table sits a tiny stub of a candle, burning with a weak, golden flame. Beside it is a small, leather-bound journal and a pencil. She writes in small, neat letters. The scratching of the pencil is the only sound in the room, a comforting, familiar noise. The ice groans under the weight of them, she writes. It sounds like the river itself is tired. We have hidden the last of the salted pork beneath the loose brick in the chimney. Mama says we must be like the mice in the fields, quiet, small, and unseen. I am not frightened tonight, only tired. The world feels so heavy. But I looked at the apple tree in the yard today. The branches are bare and covered in ice, but beneath the bark, I know it is still alive. It is waiting. We are all waiting. The snow cannot last forever. She stops writing and looks at the kindle flame. It dances slightly in a hidden draft, casting warm, flickering shadows against the wooden walls. She takes a deep breath, inhaling the scent of melting wax and old paper. It is a peaceful smell. She closes the journal, gently pinching the wick of the candle to plunge the room into absolute darkness. She crawls into her narrow bed, pulling the thick wool blankets up to her chin, and closes her eyes. The village remains silent, a cluster of dark, silent shapes huddled against the vastness of the winter steppe. The families sleep, or they lie awake listening, but they endure. Their heroism is not loud. It is not found in charges or battle cries. It is found in the quiet, steady preservation of life. It is found in the hidden potatoes, in the whispered fairy tales, in the tightly drawn curtains and the warm embraces in the dark. Outside, the footsteps continue over the frozen river. A hollow, echoing rhythm. Thud. 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 The men pass like ghosts in the night, carried along by the terrible currents of the war. They leave behind nothing but tracks in the snow, which the wind will soon blow away. But the village remains. The houses stand firm, their roots dug deep into the frozen earth. Inside, the people dream of the spring. They dream of the day when the ice will finally crack and break, when the river will sing again, and when the heavy boots will be gone from their land forever. The night stretches out, deep and endless. The snow begins to fall again, soft and heavy, drifting down to cover the roofs of the cottages in a thick, protective blanket of white. It covers the village, muffling the sounds of the road, hushing the footsteps on the river. It is a gentle, forgiving snow. It tells the world to rest. It tells the frightened hearts to slow their beating. Sleep now. The doors are locked. The hearth is quiet. The storm is outside, but in here, there is warmth. In here, there is love. In here, there is the quiet, unbreakable strength of the human spirit, waiting patiently for the dawn. Hush now. Let the deep night hold you. Sleep. Just sleep. Even in a room filled with light and warmth, the deep winter has a way of seeping quietly into the soul. Far behind the frozen rivers and the sleeping columns of weary men, there is a house. It is an old, grand estate, requisitioned from a time when these rooms hosted soft waltzes and the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. Tonight, it is the nerve center of an army, though you would not know it from the profound, velvet silence that fills the long, shadowed hallways. The hour is impossibly late. It is that deep, hollow part of the night where the world seems to hold its breath, waiting for a dawn that feels as though it might never come. In a small antechamber, lit only by the golden halo of a single desk lamp, a young adjutant named Thomas sits alone. He is listening to the slow, heavy ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Tick. Tock. A steady, unbothered heartbeat in a house filled with ghosts. Thomas rubs his tired eyes, his fingers tracing the faint, dark circles beneath them. He stands slowly, his boots making no sound on the thick, woven rug, and moves toward a small wooden sideboard. It is time for a quiet, sacred ritual. It is time to make the coffee. He reaches into a dark canvas bag and pulls out a handful of precious, roasted beans. They rattle softly, like tiny pebbles, as he pours them into the brass hopper of a hand grinder. He takes the small wooden handle and begins to turn it. Round and round. It is a soothing, repetitive motion. The gears grind with a satisfying, rhythmic crunch, breaking the hard beans down into a fine, dark powder. With every turn, the rich, earthy aroma of the coffee begins to bloom into the cold air of the room. For Thomas, this smell is a tether to another life. If he closes his eyes and breathes in deeply, he is no longer standing in a frozen, war-torn country. He is sitting at the small, sunlit table in his mother's kitchen. He can almost hear the soft hum of the radio playing in the background, almost feel the warmth of the morning sun warming the back of his neck. The aroma of the coffee is a tiny, fragile piece of home, preserved in a canvas sack, brought out only in the darkest hours of the night. He pours the ground coffee into a delicate porcelain filter. He lifts a small, iron kettle from the glowing coals of a nearby stove, where it has been quietly humming to itself for hours. Slowly, patiently, he pours the steaming water over the dark grounds. The water bubbles and hisses softly, turning into a deep, dark amber as it drips into the waiting pot below. He watches the steam rise and curl into the shadows, a warm, vanishing mist. He arranges 2 fragile porcelain cups on a silver tray. They are mismatched, scavenged from the cupboards of the old house, but they are beautiful. They are delicate things in a world that has become terribly hard. He lifts the tray, the cups rattling just a little against the silver, and walks toward the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall. He pushes the door open with his shoulder, moving with the quiet grace of a ghost. Welcome to the map room. It is a vast library, the walls lined with empty, dark wooden shelves. But the center of the room is dominated by an enormous table. And upon this table lies the world. It is a map, sprawling and vast, covered in a complex, silent language of lines, curves, and colored pens. To an untrained eye, it is just paper and ink. But to the man standing over it, leaning heavily on his knuckles, it is a living, breathing thing. It is a tapestry of human lives. The commander is an older man. The soft light from a brass lamp hanging low over the table catches the silver in his hair and the deep, exhausted lines etched into his face. He does not wear his heavy coat. He stands in his shirt sleeves, his shoulders hunched, staring down at the paper step. He does not look up when Thomas enters. He is completely lost in the silent, frozen topography of the map. Thomas steps forward, his movements slow and reverent, not wanting to shatter the fragile silence. He gently places the silver tray on the edge of the table, safely away from the curling edges of the map. He pours the dark, steaming coffee into one of the porcelain cups. He does not speak. He simply pushes the cup slightly toward the commander's resting hand. The older man blinks, as if waking from a deep trance. He turns his head slowly, looking at the cup, and then up at Thomas. His eyes are a pale, watery blue, and they are incredibly sad. They are the eyes of a man who carries the weight of 100,000 freezing boys on his shoulders. "Thank you, Thomas," he whispers, his voice rough and quiet, like dry leaves tumbling over stone. He reaches out and wraps his trembling hands around the warm porcelain. He brings the cup to his face, letting the steam warm his nose and his tired eyes. He closes his eyes for a long moment, taking a slow, deep breath, before taking a small sip. In this quiet room, far from the snowdrifts and the abandoned villages, the commander is the architect of the storm. He holds a grease pencil in his other hand. It is a simple thing, just a stick of colored wax wrapped in paper. But with a single sweep of his wrist, he can move thousands of men across the frozen earth. With a single, drawn line, he dictates who will march into the howling wind, who will wait in the dark forests, and who will cross the slippery ice of the rivers. Thomas watches him, feeling a sudden, deep well of sympathy for the old man. The soldiers in the trenches think of the generals as gods, sitting in warm rooms, completely detached from the suffering of the frost and the mud. But Thomas knows the truth. He watches the commander rub his temples, the heavy sigh that escapes his lips. Thomas sees the hesitation before every stroke of the pencil. The commander looks down at a small cluster of blue pins marking a patch of forest. He knows what those pins represent. He knows that beneath the paper, there are real trees, heavy with snow. He knows there are boys like Elias and Lev, huddled around tiny, desperate fires, shivering in their thin coats, dreaming of their mothers' kitchens and their wives' smiles. He knows that tomorrow, he must ask them to stand up and walk back into the fire. The burden of it is absolute. It is a crushing, silent weight that settles in the chest and never truly leaves. The architect must look at the map and see a chessboard, but in the dark hours of the night, when the room is quiet and the coffee is warm, he only sees the faces of the sons he is sending into the dark. "It is bitterly cold tonight," the commander says softly, almost to himself, staring into the dark liquid in his cup. "Yes, sir," Thomas whispers back. "The frost is thick on the window panes. It looks like lace." The commander nods slowly. "Lace," he repeats, a faint, melancholic smile touching the corners of his mouth. "My wife used to make lace. She would sit by the fire for hours, weaving the threads with such tiny, silver needles. It was beautiful work. So fragile." He sets the cup down and picks up the grease pencil again. He traces a slow, deliberate arc across the paper, bringing a sweeping line of blue around a cluster of red. It is the trap. It is the counterattack. It is the grand design that will turn the tide of the winter. But there is no triumph in his movement. Only a deep, heavy resignation. Sometimes, the commander whispers, leaning closer to the map, "I wish I were just a soldier again. I wish I only had to worry about my own boots, my own rifle, and the man walking beside me. It is easier to follow a path in the snow than it is to draw it." Thomas simply nods, understanding the profound loneliness of the man holding the pencil. He quietly gathers his own cup of coffee and takes a step back, melting into the shadows near the door, leaving the architect to his silent, terrible work. Thomas returns to his small desk in the antechamber. He sits down, wrapping his hands around his cup, letting the warmth soak into his skin. He reaches into the drawer and pulls out a sheet of pale, blue stationery and his fountain pen. The house is still perfectly quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock. He unscrews the cap of his pen and begins to write to his older sister. "My dear Clara," he writes, his cursive looping gracefully across the page. "It is the middle of the night, and the house is so quiet it hurts the ears. I just made coffee for the old man. He looks so tired, Clara. I think he carries every single soldier out there inside his own heart. I sit here in this warm room, and I look out the window at the snow, and I feel so incredibly small. He pauses, taking a sip of the cooling coffee. He thinks of the men out in the steppe, the ones marching under the frozen stars. I hope the wind has died down for them, he continues writing. I hope they have found a barn, or a deep drift to sleep in. I hope they are dreaming of home. The lines on the map are changing again tonight. Tomorrow, the world will shift. But right now, in this single, quiet hour, everything is holding still. I am thinking of the garden at home. I am thinking of the way the sunlight catches the dust in the hallway. Please, keep the fires burning. We need to know there is still warmth somewhere in the world. He signs his name, softly blowing on the wet ink to dry it. He folds the paper carefully, slipping it into an envelope, a tiny message of love ready to be sent across the frozen continent. Back in the map room, the commander finally sets the grease pencil down. The lines are drawn. The pins are set. The great, silent map has been given its new shape. He takes off his glasses, rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands. He looks old. He looks worn down to the very bone. He turns off the brass lamp hanging over the table. The map fades into the shadows, the sweeping lines and colored pins swallowed by the dark. The paper universe is put to rest. The commander walks slowly out of the room, his footsteps heavy and dragging. He passes Thomas at his desk, offering a tired, silent nod, and disappears down the long hallway toward his sleeping quarters. Thomas is left alone in the antechamber. The coffee in his cup is cold now. Outside the frosted windows, the sky is beginning to turn the color of wet slate. The long, dark night is finally surrendering to the pale, freezing dawn. The quiet of the headquarters remains unbroken. The decisions have been made, the lines have been drawn, but the shouting and the thunder are still hours away. For now, there is only the peaceful, gentle ticking of the clock. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. The architect is sleeping. The adjutant rests his head against the high back of his wooden chair, closing his eyes. The map sits silently in the dark, holding the fate of 100,000 sleeping men. Let them rest. Let the house remain quiet just a little longer. Let the dawn come softly, without anger, without fear. Hush now. The night is over. Sleep. Just sleep. There is a kind of silence in the deep woods that does not just empty the air of sound, but fills it with a heavy, waiting presence. If you were to walk into this ancient pine forest today, moving softly over the thick carpets of needles and snow, you might think you were entirely alone. The trees stand tall and dark, their heavy boughs sagging under the weight of the winter, forming a dense, woven canopy that blocks out the pale sky. The light here is strange and muted, a cool, blue dust that seems to exist outside of time. It is a peaceful place. It is a place where the earth is resting, held tight in the frozen grip of the season. But beneath the branches, hidden in the deep shadows and the white drifts, the forest is breathing. Thousands of men are gathered here, swallowed completely by the woods. They are the reserves, the hidden hand waiting in the dark, brought together in absolute secrecy to turn the tide of the winter. But there are no bugles sounding here. There are no shouted orders, no rumbling engines, no marching boots. The strictest command they have been given is silence. A complete and unbroken stillness. They must become ghosts, blending into the birch and the pine, and visible to the sky and to the wind. And so, they wait. Waiting is a strange and heavy burden. When the body cannot move and the voice cannot speak, the mind begins to wander, drifting across the vast, icy plains toward home, toward memory, toward all the things that are warm and bright. The men sit shoulder to shoulder in the snow, wrapped in white canvas smocks and thick, woolen blankets. They look like statues carved from ice and chalk. The cold is a physical weight, pressing against their chests, biting at their toes and their fingertips. They are not allowed to light fires. Even the smallest flicker of a match, even the faintest ribbon of wood smoke rising above the tree line, could give them away. They must endure the freezing air with nothing but the fading warmth of their own bodies and the shared heat of the men sitting beside them. Look closely at a cluster of soldiers huddled beneath the sweeping branches of a massive fir tree. Their faces are half hidden behind thick scarves, their breath rising in slow, rhythmic plumes of white mist. It is the only movement in the quiet grove. Every exhale is a tiny cloud, a fragile piece of life suspended in the frost, lingering for just a moment before dissolving into the gray air. One of the men slowly reaches into his coat, his movements sluggish and deliberate, careful not to snap a dry twig or rustle the canvas. He pulls out a small, metal tin. Inside are 3 pale, hard candies, saved for weeks in the depths of his pack. He does not speak. He simply nudges the man beside him with a heavy elbow and holds the tin open. The second man, his eyelashes thick with white frost, slowly takes one of the candies with a trembling, mittened hand. He nods, a tiny, barely perceptible dip of his chin. It is a profound exchange. In this vast, freezing silence, the offering of a piece of sugar is an act of immense, quiet love. It is a reminder that they are still human, still capable of gentle things in a world made of ice and iron. They place the candies on their tongues, letting them slowly dissolve, closing their eyes to savor the faint, artificial taste of cherry. For a few minutes, the sharp bite of the cold recedes, replaced by the memory of childhood summers, of sticky fingers and bright afternoons. A few yards away, leaning against the rough, fragrant bark of a pine tree, a young soldier named Heinrich has rested his heavy steel helmet on his knees. It serves as a makeshift desk. The forest is so dim that he must lean close to the paper to see the faint gray lines of his pencil. He is writing a letter. He knows, as they all know, what this waiting means. They have been gathered here to be the hammer, to strike back against the storm that has chased them across the steppe. When the order finally comes to move, they will leave the sanctuary of these trees and step out into the blinding white light of the plains. Heinrich does not let his mind dwell on what lies beyond the edge of the forest. He focuses only on the paper, on the small, precise loops of his handwriting. "My dearest Elsa," he writes, his hand shaking slightly, making the letters jagged and uneven. "I am sitting in a forest so quiet, I can hear the snowflakes landing on the branches. The air smells of pine and frost. It is almost beautiful, if you forget why we are here. I have been sitting for hours, and all I can think about is the window in our sitting room. I wonder if the frost has made those fern patterns on the glass again. I wonder if you are sitting beside it, knitting in the afternoon light." He stops writing and gently blows on his fingers, trying to coax a little feeling back into the numb flesh. He stares into the middle distance, watching a single, delicate snowflake drift down from the canopy. He knows this letter might never find a mailbag. He knows it might remain folded in his breast pocket when he walks out of the woods. But he must write it. The act of writing is the act of holding onto the world. It is the casting of a line across thousands of miles of frozen earth, anchoring his heart to hers. "Do not worry if you do not hear from me for a while," he continues, the pencil scratching softly, a sound like a dry leaf skittering across a stone. "We are moving soon. But know that in this quiet place, in this deep snow, I am carrying you with me. If I close my eyes, I can feel your hand in mine. Keep the house warm, Elsa. Keep the lamps lit. I love you." He folds the paper carefully, his stiff fingers struggling with the creases, and tucks it away. He leans his head back against the tree, pulling his scarf higher over his nose, and closes his eyes, surrendering to the heavy, peaceful waiting. All around him, the forest is full of men doing the very same thing. They are a silent congregation of memory and longing. Some are reading old letters, their lips moving silently as they mouth the words they have memorized by heart. Some are looking at photographs shielded carefully in the palms of their hands, trying to absorb the warmth of a painted smile. Some are simply staring up at the intricate lacework of the pine branches, praying soft, wordless prayers to a sky they cannot see. Further back in the trees, hidden beneath enormous nets woven with strips of white cloth, the great machines of the army are sleeping. The tanks and the half-tracks look like strange, massive boulders covered in snow. Their engines are cold and silent. The crews sit leaning against the steel tracks, wrapped in blankets, looking like shepherds guarding a flock of iron beasts. There is no smell of diesel or exhaust here today, only the clean, sharp scent of the winter woods. The war has been paused. It is holding its breath. Even the horses, standing tied to the sturdy trunks of the older trees, seem to understand the sacredness of the quiet. They do not whinny or stamp their hooves. They stand with their heads bowed, their thick winter coats fluffed against the chill, their breath mixing with the breath of the men. A driver stands beside his horse, gently running a brush down its neck in long, slow, soothing strokes. The horse leans slightly into the touch, a massive, gentle creature finding comfort in the dark. As the hours drift by, the light in the forest begins to change. The cool blue dusk slowly deepens into a bruised, heavy purple, and then, finally, into the velvet black of the deep winter night. The temperature drops further, the cold tightening its grip, snapping the frozen sap in the trees with sharp, sudden cracks that echo like distant gunshots. The men pull their knees tightly to their chests. They share their blankets, turning inward, creating small, fragile islands of warmth in the ocean of the dark. The waiting is almost over. They can feel it in the air, a subtle shift in the invisible currents of the night. The silence is no longer just empty, it is stretched tight, like a wire about to snap. But for now, the order has not come. For now, the forest still holds them in its protective, shadowed embrace. The wind begins to pick up, a soft, mournful sigh moving through the very tops of the pine trees. It is a lullaby sung by the earth itself. It whispers to the men huddled below, telling them to rest their heavy heads. It tells them to close their tired eyes and let the world drift away for just a little while longer. Listen to the wind in the branches. It is a gentle, sweeping sound. Hush now. The letters are written. The memories are safely tucked away in the deep pockets over their hearts. The machines are sleeping, and the horses are still. There is nothing left to do but breathe. In this frozen, suspended moment, there is no fear, no anger, no rushing forward. There is only the beautiful, aching peace of the quiet forest. They are hidden away from the world, safe under the thick, white blanket of the snow. Sleep, tired boys. Sleep in the shadows of the ancient trees. Let your breath rise like a gentle mist into the dark. The morning will come, and the world will wake, but tonight, the forest is yours. Rest now. Just breathe. Just sleep. There is a moment when you walk so far into the snow, the world behind you simply ceases to exist. Look out at the horizon. It is no longer a sharp line dividing the earth from the heavens. The sky, pale and heavy with unfallen snow, has reached down to touch the endless, rolling plains. They have blended together into a single, vast ocean of white. There are no trees here. There are no ruined houses or forgotten wooden fences. There is only the quiet. It is a silence so profound, so deep, that it feels as though the entire universe has paused to hold its breath. For weeks, the men have been walking. They have been the pursuers, a great, moving tide chasing the shadows across the frozen earth. They were fueled by a quiet, desperate hope, pulled forward by the belief that every step brought them closer to the end of the storm. But now, the air has changed. The feeling of triumph has slowly faded, replaced by a strange, hollow sensation. They have reached too far. The invisible thread that binds a soldier to the world of the living, the tether of wagons and warmth, of heavy bread and warm soup, has been stretched until it is thin and frayed. Miles and miles behind them, lost in the shifting drifts, the wooden carts are stalled. The horses are too tired to pull. The snow has simply swallowed the roads. And so, the men at the very front of the line find themselves entirely alone, drifting like small, solitary boats on a frozen sea. They feel a strange lightness in their packs. The canvas bags that once held heavy, dark loaves of bread and small tins of meat are now flat and empty. The heavy belts of brass and iron around their waists have grown lighter, too. But this lightness is not a comfort. It is a quiet reminder of how far they have traveled from the hearth. It is the lightness of a leaf detached from the branch, floating on the winter wind, unsure of where it will finally land. In the absolute front of this vanguard walks a young boy named Ilya. He is bundled so thickly in ragged wool and captured blankets that he looks like a walking pile of shadows. His breath escapes the thick knit of his scarf in tiny, rhythmic puffs, dissolving instantly into the vast white air. He keeps his head down, watching the snow pass beneath his frozen boots. Step. 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 The rhythm is the only thing keeping his mind from drifting away entirely. For days, they have been following the deep, jagged scars left by the retreating army. The heavy tracks of machines, the countless, overlapping footprints of tired men. It was a trail of breadcrumbs in the dark, a sign that they were still in the world of men. But as Ilya crests a small, gentle rise in the snow, he stops. The men behind him, moving in that sleepy, hypnotic trance of the long march, bump softly into him, a gentle collapse of exhausted bodies. Ilya does not complain. He simply points a mittened hand at the ground. The tracks are gone. The wind, sweeping unimpeded across the vast Ukrainian steppe, has been at work. It has blown the dry, powdery snow over the deep ruts, filling them in, smoothing them out. But it is more than just the wind. The trail itself has thinned, spreading out and dissolving into the landscape. The shadows they were chasing have simply melted away into the lonely horizon. There is nothing ahead of them but pure, untouched snow. An eerie, beautiful emptiness. An older soldier, a man whose face is deeply lined with the cold and the years, steps up beside Ilya. He looks at the blank canvas of the earth, and then up at the blank canvas of the sky. He lets out a long, slow sigh. It is a sound of profound realization. They have walked off the edge of the map. They have stepped into the quiet void, and there is no one left to guide them, no one left to follow. It is like walking into a cloud, Ilya whispers, his voice barely carrying over the soft rustle of the wind. The older man nods slowly. He reaches into the deep pocket of his coat and pulls out a small, incredibly precious object. It is a single, dried apple ring, saved from an autumn orchard that feels like a lifetime away. It is wrinkled and tough, but it smells faintly of sunlight and sweet earth. He carefully tears the small ring exactly in half. He does not say a word. He simply places one half into Ilya's thick glove. Ilya looks down at the piece of fruit. In this vast, empty world, it is the greatest treasure a man could give. It is a silent promise. We are in the empty place, but you are not alone. Ilya places the dry fruit on his tongue, letting it slowly soften, closing his eyes to savor the ghost of the summer sun. As the afternoon light begins to fail, turning the white snow into a soft, bruised lavender, the men realize they must stop. There is no destination to reach tonight. There is no village to take, no line to hold. There is only the snow, and the falling dark. They begin to dig. Using their numb hands and small, freezing spades, they carve shallow trenches into the drifts, seeking any shelter they can find from the wind that has begun to whisper across the plains. They cannot light fires tonight. There is no wood in this empty place, not even a broken branch. There is only the snow. They huddle together in the shallow hollows they have made. They pull their thin canvas shelter halves over their heads, trying to trap the tiny amount of heat their exhausted bodies still produce. They lie packed tightly against one another, chest to back, a long line of shivering, quiet humanity buried under the frost. In the dim, icy gloom beneath the canvas, a soldier fumbles with a small, stubby pencil and a piece of paper that feels as fragile as a moth's wing. The light is so poor he can barely see the words he is forming, but his hands know the shapes of his heart's desires. "Mother," he writes, his hand shaking with the cold. "I do not know where we are tonight. The world has become very large and very empty. We have walked so far that even the footprints of the men we are following have disappeared. It is so quiet here. It is a quiet that rings in the ears. I miss the sound of the clock in the kitchen. I miss the sound of the dog scratching at the door. When you look out into nothing but snow, you begin to forget what colors look like. Please, keep my heavy sweater by the stove. I am so tired of the cold. I just want to sit by the fire and listen to you hum." He stops writing, his fingers too stiff to hold the pencil any longer. He folds the paper carefully, slipping it into a pocket close to his skin, hoping his own faint body heat will keep the words safe. Outside the canvas, the night has fully arrived. It is a clear night. The clouds have parted, revealing a sky dusted with a million hard, glittering stars. They look like chips of ice scattered across deep, black velvet. They are beautiful, but they offer no warmth. They only emphasize the terrifying, majestic vastness of the steppe. The overreached hand is suspended in the dark. The tether is drawn tight, trembling in the cold air. The men know, deep in their bones, that this eerie peace is a fragile thing. When you reach too far into the empty dark, eventually, something reaches back. The silence is too perfect. The snow is too undisturbed. It is the heavy, loaded pause before the winter wind changes its direction. But for tonight, there is nothing they can do but wait. There is no retreat, and there is nowhere left to advance. They are suspended in the beautiful, terrible quiet. Listen to the breathing of the men huddled in the snow. It is a slow, unified rhythm. The rise and fall of tired chests. They have surrendered to the emptiness. They close their eyes and let their minds travel back along that long, stretched tether. They dream of the wooden carts full of bread. They dream of the warm, smoky scent of the field kitchens. They dream of small, enclosed spaces, of thick walls and heavy doors locking out the vastness of the world. The wind whispers over the plains, sweeping away the last traces of their footsteps, sealing them into the deep winter. It hums a low, lonely song over the snowdrifts. It is telling the earth to sleep. It is telling the men to rest their weary bones. There is nothing to fear in the quiet tonight. The horizon is empty. The stars are keeping their cold, distant watch. Let the heavy darkness wrap around you like a blanket. Let the silence soothe the aching muscles and the tired mind. You have walked far enough today. You have reached the edge of the world, and now it is time to rest. Hush now. Listen to the soft, shifting snow. Close your eyes. And sleep. Just sleep. There is a subtle language to the winter wind, and if you listen closely enough, you can hear the exact moment it changes its mind. For weeks, the great, sweeping gusts had been at the backs of the men, pushing them gently across the endless white plains. It was a wind that felt almost like a hand, guiding them forward, urging them toward the setting sun and the promise of an end to the walking. But out here, on the vast and lonely Ukrainian steppe, nothing is permanent. The earth holds no loyalties. The sky makes no promises. In a small, sturdy farmhouse made of thick stone and heavy timber, the air is warm and smells faintly of wood ash and dried chamomile. This is a sanctuary, a quiet island in the middle of the frozen sea. It is a field hospital, though that is a grand name for a room with a few iron cots and a pot of water perpetually boiling over a small iron stove. Here, a medic named Anton sits on a low wooden stool. He is a quiet man with gentle, steady hands and eyes that have learned how to look at sorrow without turning away. He is rolling bandages. He takes the long strips of washed cotton and turns them slowly, rhythmically, over and over, creating neat, tight cylinders of white cloth. It is a soothing, repetitive task. The soft scrape of the cotton against itself is the only sound in the room, save for the slow, heavy breathing of the 3 exhausted men sleeping in the corner. They have been advancing for so long that the arrival of the wounded has become a predictable, slow trickle from the west. Men with frostbitten toes, men who have simply collapsed from the sheer, crushing weight of the miles they have walked. Anton patches them, warms them, and lets them sleep. But as Anton reaches for another strip of cotton, he pauses. He looks toward the small window, its panes thick with delicate, fern-like patterns of frost. He does not see anything out in the dark, but he feels it. A sudden, strange pressure in the room. The draft that usually creeps in from beneath the eastern doorstop has suddenly stopped. The flame in the oil lamp on his table flickers, stands perfectly straight for one breathless second, and then bends sharply in the opposite direction. The wind has changed. It is no longer pushing from behind. It has turned, swinging around in the deep winter night, and is now blowing hard and cold directly into their faces. And carried on this new wind is a sound. It is not the sharp, angry roar of a battle. It is a low, deep vibration, a heavy thrumming that seems to come from beneath the snow itself. It is the sound of the world shifting its weight. Anton stands up slowly, setting his roll of cotton on the table. He walks to the heavy wooden door and pulls it open just a crack. The air that hits his face is bitterly cold, carrying the sharp, metallic scent of a newly turned storm. He peers out into the gloom. The snow, which had been falling in lazy, drifting flakes, is now driving horizontally, a blinding white sheet moving east. And emerging from this whiteout, moving with a desperate, heavy urgency, are the sleds. They are coming from the wrong direction. For days, the tracks in the snow had all pointed west. But now, the tide has suddenly, violently reversed. The sleds are pulled by panting horses, their coats thick with ice, their heads bowed low against the driving snow. Beside them walk the men who had been at the very front of the line. The men who had walked into the beautiful, eerie emptiness just hours before. They are no longer walking with that slow, hypnotic rhythm of the pursuit. They are stumbling. They are leaning on each other, looking back over their shoulders into the blinding snow, their eyes wide and dark with a quiet, profound shock. The ghosts they had been chasing have suddenly turned around. Anton opens the door wider, stepping out into the biting wind to help guide the first sled toward the warmth of the farmhouse. He reaches out and takes the bridle of the lead horse, his hand smoothing the frozen hair on its muzzle. The animal leans into him, letting out a long, ragged exhale that plumes into the dark air. From the back of the wooden sled, a soldier is gently lifted and carried inside. He is young, his face smeared with soot and pale with the terrible realization of the shifting world. Anton guides him to one of the cots, helping him lie back against the rough wool blankets. The boy is trembling, but he is not gravely injured. He is suffering from the sudden, overwhelming reversal of hope. "We were just walking," the boy whispers, his voice shaking. He looks up at the ceiling, his eyes unfocused, remembering the shock of the empty horizon suddenly filling with shadows. The snow was completely empty. We thought they were gone. But then the trees just started moving. They came out of the forest like they were born from the snow itself. A great gray wave. Anton does not ask questions. He knows that the grand strategies of generals do not matter in this room. All that matters is the cold, and the fear, and the desperate need for comfort. He takes a clean, warm cloth from the pot on the stove. He wrings it out, letting the hot water steam in the cool air of the room, and gently presses it to the boy's dirty forehead. "Hush now," Anton murmurs, his voice a low, soothing hum. "You are inside now. You are warm. Let the wind blow out there. It cannot touch you here." He washes the soot from the boy's cheeks, moving with the careful, deliberate grace of a father tending to a sleeping child. He unlaces the boy's heavy, frozen boots, pulling them off to reveal thick woolen socks. He wraps the boy's cold feet in a heated blanket, tucking the edges in tightly. The boy closes his eyes, a tear escaping and running down into his ear. "We have to walk all the way back," he whispers, the weight of the miles crashing down upon him. "Everything we walked, we have to do it again. But backwards." "Do not think of the miles," Anton says softly, pouring a small tin cup of hot, sweetened water. He lifts the boy's head gently and brings the cup to his cracked lips. "Think only of the warmth in your chest. Think only of this room. Tomorrow will take care of itself." As the boy drinks, his shivering slowly begins to subside. The sugar and the heat work their quiet magic, loosening the tight, terrified knot in his stomach. He looks at Anton, his eyes softening with gratitude. "My hands are too cold to hold a pencil," the boy says softly, looking down at his mittened fingers. Would you write something for me? Just in case." Anton nods slowly. He reaches into the pocket of his smock and pulls out a small, worn leather notebook and a stub of lead. He pulls his wooden stool closer to the cot, resting the book on his knee. "Tell me," Anton whispers. "Who are we writing to?" "To my wife, Elena," the boy says, a faint, beautiful smile touching his lips as he speaks her name. He closes his eyes, seeing her face in the dark behind his eyelids. "My sweet Elena," the boy dictates, his voice growing incredibly soft, blending with the sound of the wind rattling the window panes. The wind changed direction today. It is blowing from the west now, very hard and very cold. We have stopped walking forward. We are turning around. I do not understand the map, and I do not understand the war. I only know that the snow is very deep, and the way home feels a little longer tonight." Anton writes quickly, his handwriting elegant and flowing, capturing the boy's words like fragile butterflies in a net. "But you must not worry," the boy continues, taking a slow, shaky breath. "Even when the wind pushes against me, I am leaning into it, and I am leaning toward you. I remembered the blue dress you wore on the day of the harvest festival. I remembered how the fabric caught the autumn breeze. I hold that memory right here, in the center of my chest, and it keeps the frost away. Please, make sure the firewood is stacked high by the back door. I want to build a great, roaring fire when I see you again. I am safe tonight. I am warm. I love you." Anton finishes the last letter, drawing a small, quiet period at the end of the page. He tears the sheet from the notebook, folds it twice into a neat, small square, and tucks it gently into the breast pocket of the boy's tunic, right over his beating heart. "It is safe there," Anton whispers. "It will keep you company." The boy nods, his heavy eyelids finally drooping. The exhaustion of the retreat, the shock of the sudden counterattack, and the soothing warmth of the stove finally pull him under. He drifts into a deep, heavy sleep, his breathing evening out into a slow, rhythmic sigh. Anton stands up and looks around the room. The field hospital is filling up. More sleds have arrived, bringing more men who have been pushed back by the shifting tide. But there is no panic in this room. There is only a profound, quiet resignation. They are men who understand that the winter is a vast, indifferent ocean, and they are merely sailors caught in its currents. Sometimes the tide brings you to the shore, and sometimes it pulls you back out into the deep. Anton goes back to his table. He sits down on the wooden stool and picks up his roll of cotton. He begins to wind the bandage again. Smooth, white, and clean. Round and round. Outside, the wind howls across the steppe. The great counterattack has begun, a massive, silent shifting of weight in the dark. The tracks they made yesterday are being erased, covered by the driving snow, leaving the earth blank and new once more. But inside the stone walls, the war is far away. The only reality is the heat of the stove, the softness of the blanket, and the gentle, rhythmic turning of the cotton in the medic's hands. Listen to the wind. It is just air moving over the ice. It has no anger. It has no malice. It is simply the breath of the earth settling into a new rhythm for the night. Do not fear the shifting of the tide. You are safe here, in the warm light of the oil lamp. Let the men sleep. Let their weary bodies sink into the cots. They do not have to walk tonight. They do not have to face the storm. They can close their eyes and dream of blue dresses and autumn festivals, of yellow doors and warm fires. The wind has changed direction, but it does not matter. The snow will fall, the night will deepen, and the earth will continue its quiet, endless turning. Rest your head. The hard work of the day is done. Hush now. Listen to the soft crackle of the stove. Listen to the quiet breathing in the dark. Let the deep peace of the winter night wrap around you. Sleep. Just sleep. Out in the deep white of the steppe, the world is so vast that even the loudest thunder eventually fades into a quiet, lonely echo. Listen to the wind as it sweeps across the endless plains. It carries no voices, no memory of the day, only the soft, continuous rustle of the dry snow moving over the ice. To the men sitting in warm rooms far away, standing over grand wooden tables, this landscape is a chessboard. They draw sweeping arrows with wax pencils. They move invisible blocks of men from one village to another, orchestrating a great, turning dance across the map. But down here, on the ground, there are no squares. There are no clear lines. There is only the overwhelming, blinding white. For the infantryman, the grand strategy does not exist. The world extends only as far as the driving snow allows him to see. It is just the man in front of him, the heavy rifle slung over his aching shoulder, and the desperate, quiet need to keep placing one foot in front of the other. The armies are shifting, wrapping around one another in the freezing mist. It is a strange, phantom movement. The lines have become fluid, broken and scattered by the sudden change in the wind. Men who were retreating yesterday are now walking forward, and men who were advancing are now lost in the whiteout. Because of this great, confusing dance, the steppe is full of ghosts. Sometimes, squads of men wandering through the blizzard suddenly stumble upon one another. Out of the swirling gray fog, a shape will emerge. A heavy coat. A frosted helmet. A shadow that belongs to the other side. There is no roar of battle in these moments. The cold is too deep, the exhaustion too profound for anger. There is only a sudden, startling pause. A brief, frantic flurry of movement, a few scattered sounds swallowed instantly by the vastness, and then, just as quickly, they melt back into the snow. They are fleeting encounters, like ships passing in a heavy fog, leaving behind nothing but rapidly filling footprints and a lingering sense of unreality. As the afternoon light begins to fail, the sky turns the color of bruised plums and wet slate. The temperature plummets, turning the moisture in the air into tiny, biting diamonds of ice. A small group of soldiers, their uniforms stiff with frost, spots a dark shape rising from the snow in the distance. It is a barn. Or, at least, the memory of a barn. Its roof sags heavily under the weight of the winter, and half of its wooden slats have been stripped away by the wind or by other passing armies desperate for firewood. But the sturdy stone foundation remains, and it offers the one thing these men crave more than food or sleep. It offers a wall against the wind. They approach it slowly, their boots dragging in the deep drifts. The wooden door hangs crookedly on a single, rusted iron hinge. It groans a low, welcoming note as the first man pushes it aside and steps into the gloom. Inside, the air is still. The sudden absence of the howling wind feels like stepping into a cathedral. The silence is thick and heavy, smelling of old, dry earth, ancient hay, and the deep, abiding scent of the frost. The men file in, collapsing against the stone walls, letting their heavy packs slide from their shoulders. They do not speak. They simply sit in the dim light, breathing in the quiet, their chests rising and falling in a slow, exhausted rhythm. But as their eyes adjust to the shadows, the squad leader, an older man named Tomas, notices something in the far corner. A pile of old hay seems to be shifting, rising, and falling with a shallow, ragged breath. Tomas slowly stands up. He does not reach for his weapon. He simply walks across the dirt floor, his footsteps muted by the dust and the loose straw. He kneels beside the hay. Lying there is a boy. He is wrapped in a heavy brown coat, the uniform of the men they have been fighting. He is entirely alone, left behind in the chaotic shifting of the lines, too weak or too sick to keep walking. The boy's eyes are closed, his face pale and shining with a thin sheen of fever sweat despite the freezing air. His lips are cracked, and he is shivering violently, his small body vibrating against the cold earth. Tomas looks down at him. In another time, in another place, this boy is the enemy. But here, in the ruined barn, under the bruised twilight of the steppe, the uniform means nothing. The war is a distant, meaningless thunder. Here, there is only a freezing, frightened child, and an older man who has sons of his own. Tomas slowly pulls off his thick, woolen glove. He reaches out and gently rests the back of his bare hand against the boy's forehead. It is burning hot. The boy flinches slightly at the touch, his eyes fluttering open. They are wide and dark, filled with the sudden, quiet terror of a trapped animal. He sees Tomas's gray coat and tries to shrink back into the hay, his breathing turning shallow and quick. "Hush," Tomas whispers, his voice low and incredibly gentle. "Hush now. Lie still." He speaks in his own language, a language the boy does not understand, but the tone requires no translation. It is the universal cadence of comfort. Tomas reaches to his belt and unhooks his metal canteen. The water inside is half frozen, a slush of ice and extreme cold. He unscrews the cap and carefully supports the back of the boy's head with his bare hand, bringing the rim of the canteen to the boy's dry lips. The boy hesitates for a fraction of a second, and then he drinks. He drinks greedily, the icy water soothing the fire in his throat. Water spills down his chin, but Tomas just holds him steady, waiting patiently until the boy turns his head away, letting out a long, shuddering sigh. The other men in the squad have been watching from the opposite wall. They do not shout. They do not protest. The endless walking has stripped away their anger, leaving only a hollow, numb empathy. One of the men, a quiet farmer from the valleys, stands up. He walks over, unwrapping a thick, gray woolen scarf from his own neck. He kneels beside Tomas and gently drapes the scarf over the boy's shivering chest, tucking the edges in tightly around his shoulders. The farmer meets Tomas's eyes, offering a single, slow nod, before returning to his spot against the wall. It is a tiny, profound act of shared humanity. In the vast, indifferent emptiness of the steppe, they have chosen to build a small, fragile fire of kindness. Tomas sits down in the hay next to the boy. He pulls his knees up to his chest and wraps his own coat tighter around himself. The boy looks at him, the terror slowly draining from his dark eyes, replaced by a heavy, confused exhaustion. He blinks slowly, the heat of the fever pulling him back down into sleep. Tomas stays beside him, offering the silent comfort of a shared presence in the dark. Across the room, near the shattered doorway, a young soldier named Joseph has found a comparatively dry patch of earth. He pulls a small, hooded lantern from his pack. He does not light the wick, it is too dangerous to show a flame to the open steppe, but he opens the small glass door and strikes a single match, letting it burn just long enough to read by its brief, golden flare. From his breast pocket, he pulls a letter. It is soft and worn, folded and unfolded so many times that the creases have become fragile. He lights a second match, holding it carefully, watching the warm light dance across the familiar handwriting of his older sister. He reads her words in the quiet dark. She tells him about the heavy snow falling on the roof of their family home. She tells him how the old hound dog sleeps as close to the kitchen stove as he can get without singeing his tail. She writes of the smell of roasting apples, of the way the frost looks on the wrought iron gate in the morning. Joseph closes his eyes, letting the match burn down until the heat touches his fingertips. He blows it out, plunging the barn back into the soft, gray shadows of the twilight. He holds the letter against his face. The paper is cold, but the words hold a tremendous, radiant heat. They are tethered to a world that makes sense, a world where barns are used to hold golden wheat and gentle cows, not freezing men and ghosts. He carefully puts the letter away and pulls out a small, blank notebook and a pencil. He works completely by touch in the dimming light, trusting his hands to form the letters. "My dearest sister," he writes, the pencil scratching softly against the paper, a sound like a small mouse moving in the straw. "I am sitting in a ruined barn, watching the night fall over the plains. The world here is so incredibly large, and we are so very small. It is like being a single speck of dust floating in a white room. But we are safe tonight. The wind cannot reach us here." He looks across the dim space, watching the silhouette of Tomas sitting quietly beside the sleeping enemy boy. "The snow makes everything equal," Joseph continues, writing slowly. "When you are cold enough, you forget the maps. You forget the lines they drew for us. You only see another person who is shivering. We have a guest with us tonight. He wears a different coat, but he is just a boy, sick and tired, just like the rest of us. Tomas gave him his water. We gave him a scarf. We are all just trying to make it to the morning." He stops writing, listening to the sound of the wind picking up outside. It howls around the corners of the stone foundation, a lonely, whistling song. But inside, it is peaceful. "Please, keep reading to the dog by the stove," he writes, signing his name at the bottom of the page. "Keep the house warm. I am carrying the memory of that warmth in my pocket. Good night, sweet sister." He closes the notebook. The barn has grown completely dark now. The only sounds are the whistling of the wind outside and the collective, rhythmic breathing of the men inside. They are a strange family, gathered in the ruins. They are hunters and the hunted, brought together by the sheer, crushing weight of the winter. They sleep leaning against the stone, their heads resting on their canvas packs. Tomas sleeps with his back against the wooden post, his hand resting lightly near the sleeping boy, a silent, unconscious guard. Outside, the snow begins to fall again. It drifts down from the black sky, thick and heavy, swirling around the ruined barn. It fills the footprints the men left in the snow, erasing their path, wiping the chessboard clean once more. It coats the sagging roof in a fresh, soft layer of white, burying the barn in the landscape. Let the steppe echo with the wind. Let the vast plain stretch out into the dark. Inside this small, broken space, there is a quiet, beautiful peace. There is no war here tonight. There is only rest. Listen to the gentle, slow breathing in the dark. It is the sound of life, holding on, keeping each other safe. The cold cannot touch them now. The long walk is paused. Close your eyes, and let the heavy blanket of the winter night cover you. Hush now. All is calm. All is quiet. Sleep. Just sleep. Even in the darkest of winters, the ice eventually learns how to weep. Listen to the heavy, wooden doors of the old village church. They are thick and ancient, bound in dark iron, and they are closed tightly against the biting wind. Outside those doors, the world is shifting in a great, terrifying dance. The vast armies are clashing on the open plains, moving through the deep drifts like tectonic plates colliding in the dark. You can hear it, if you listen closely, but it is very far away. It sounds only like a low, muffled thunder rolling beneath the frozen earth, a dull vibration that shakes the dust from the heavy stone blocks. But do not think of the storm outside. Leave the freezing winds and the endless, blinding plains behind you. Step through the heavy wooden doors and into the quiet. Inside the sanctuary, the air is hushed and perfectly still. The vast, vaulted ceilings reach up into the shadows, disappearing into a canopy of dark, ancient timber. High above the altar, a great section of the domed roof has been fractured, open to the night by the careless hand of the war. Through this jagged opening, the winter sky looks down. Delicate, slow-falling snowflakes drift through the hole, spiraling lazily through the dim air like tiny, weightless feathers. They fall into the nave, landing softly on the smooth flagstones, melting instantly into small, dark pools of quiet water. It is as if the sky itself is offering a gentle benediction, a silent, weeping grace upon the room below. This ruined church is no longer a place of formal worship. It has become a sanctuary of a different kind. The long wooden pews have been pushed against the stone walls, creating a wide, open space filled with a sea of low canvas cots and thick, woolen blankets. It is a field hospital, a fragile island of warmth and preservation in the middle of the frozen world. The air here is thick and heavy, but it is not frightening. It smells of the deep, earthy scent of melting snow brought in on heavy boots, layered with the sharp, clean tang of iodine and the lingering, sweet memory of beeswax candles and old, burnt incense. It is a smell that speaks of care, of weary safety, of a place where tired men can finally close their eyes and stop walking. Moving softly between the long rows of cots are the nurses. They do not walk, they glide. Their steps are muffled by heavy felt shoes, making no sound against the stone floor. They wear aprons over thick winter dresses, the fabric faded and worn soft by countless washings. They are the quiet guardians of the dark hours, moving with a slow, exhausted grace that is beautiful to behold. Follow one of these women. Her name is forgotten by history, but her face is a portrait of profound, quiet endurance. There are dark shadows beneath her eyes, and her hands are red and chapped from the biting cold and the endless work. Yet, when she leans over a cot, her touch is as light as a falling leaf. She carries a small, dented tin basin filled with warm water. She kneels beside a sleeping soldier whose face is dark with the soot and the dust of the long retreat. She dips a clean, white cotton cloth into the basin. She wrings it out, the hot water steaming gently in the cool air of the church, and presses it carefully to his forehead. She wipes away the grime, washing away the miles, washing away the fear of the open step. As she cleans the cloths and wrings them out again, the water in the tin basin begins to change. It is no longer clear. It shifts, taking on a pale, delicate hue. It turns the color of a winter sunrise, a soft, diluted rose. It is the color of melting ice mixed with the fading echoes of the war. But there is no horror in this small tin bowl. It is simply the color of burdens being lifted, of pain being gently washed away and dissolved into the water. It is the color of healing, held carefully in the tired, steady hands of a woman who refuses to surrender to the dark. She moves to the next cot, where a young boy is lying awake. He is barely old enough to shave, his face pale and his eyes wide with the lingering shock of the thunder outside. He is shivering, his knuckles white as he grips the edge of his coarse blanket, staring up at the snow falling gently through the broken roof. The nurse sits on a small, three-legged wooden stool beside him. She does not ask him about the war. She knows the mind needs a place to rest, a safe harbor far away from the frozen rivers and the ruined barns. She takes his trembling, icy hand in both of her warm ones, sandwiching his fingers between her palms. "Tell me about your window," she whispers. Her voice is a low, soothing melody, barely louder than the crackle of the iron. "Stove in the corner. Tell me what you see when you look out of the window in your bedroom." The boy blinks, his wide eyes focusing on her gentle face. He takes a slow, shaky breath. "An apple tree," he whispers, his voice dry and trembling. "There's an old apple tree. Its branches touch the glass when the wind blows. In the spring, the blossoms look like snow, but they are soft, and they smell like honey." "And did you leave the heavy blankets on your bed?" she asked softly, rubbing the back of his hand with her thumb. Yes, the boy murmurs, his eyes beginning to droop as his mind travels back across the vast plains, returning to the small, quiet room of his childhood. My mother put the heavy quilt on the bed. The one with the blue squares. It is very warm. Then you must close your eyes and sleep under that quilt, the nurse whispers, leaning in close. The winter here is just a dream. The apple tree is waiting for you. The blossoms are already dreaming of the spring beneath the bark. Close your eyes. Go back to the blue quilt. The boy's grip on the blanket slowly loosens. The frantic shivering subsides into a slow, rhythmic breath. The nurse's quiet words have built a bridge of light over the dark, terrifying waters of his memory, and he walks across it into a deep, heavy slumber. She rests his hand gently on his chest and stands up, picking up her tin basin, continuing her silent, sacred rounds. In a shadowed corner of the church, beneath a stone statue of a patron saint looking down with painted, compassionate eyes, two men sit together. One of the men is lying flat, his eyes covered with a thick wrapping of soft white cotton. The world has gone completely dark for him. Beside him sits an orderly, a man with a shattered arm resting in a canvas sling. The orderly holds a piece of wrinkled paper in his good hand. He has angled himself toward the weak, amber glow of a nearby oil lamp. He is reading a letter aloud. She says the river behind the mill has finally begun to thaw, the orderly reads, his voice a rich, resonant baritone that carries softly through the quiet arches of the sanctuary. She says she heard the ice crack yesterday morning. A sound like a wooden branch snapping in the woods. The water is running fast and clear beneath the shelves of ice. The blind soldier turns his head toward the sound of the orderly's voice. A faint, beautiful smile touches the corners of his mouth. She says she found a single, green shoot pushing up through the frost near the back step. The orderly continues, reading slowly, letting each word hang in the air so it can be fully absorbed. A little snowdrop flower. She wrapped it in a warm towel so it would not freeze in the night. She says to tell you the earth is waking up. The blind soldier sighs, a long, deep exhale of profound contentment. He cannot see the stone walls or the falling snow. But in his mind, painted by the gentle words of the letter, he sees the rushing river, he sees the brave little green shoot, he sees the face of the woman he loves standing by the back step. The words are a medicine more powerful than the iodine or the bandages. They are a tether holding him tightly to the beautiful, living world. Further down the nave, a soldier lies perfectly still, his eyes squeezed shut against a pain he cannot articulate. In his hand, held so tightly that his knuckles are stark white, is a small, tarnished brass pocket watch. It has stopped ticking. The silence of the watch is a terrifying thing to him, a symbol of the halted world, of a time that is frozen solid just like the earth outside. A passing nurse notices his white-knuckled grip. She stops, kneeling quietly on the stone floor. She reaches out and gently covers his rigid fist with her own warm hand. "May I?" she asks, a soft, breathless whisper. The soldier hesitates, then slowly opens his fingers. The watch sits in his palm, cold and dead. The nurse takes it with infinite care. She winds the small, ridged dial at the top. Click. 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 It is a tiny, mechanical sound of hope. She winds it until the spring is tight, and then she places the cool brass casing gently against the soldier's ear. Tick. 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 The steady, unbothered heartbeat of the watch fills his ear. It is a rhythm of absolute order. It tells him that seconds are passing, that minutes are moving forward, that this terrible night is not endless. Time is still moving. The world is still turning. The soldier's breathing slows, matching the steady rhythm of the tiny brass gears, and he finally relaxes into the soft mattress of the cot. As the night deepens, the muffled thunder from the distant plains begins to fade, finally dying away entirely. The armies have exhausted themselves, surrendering to the crushing weight of the dark and the cold. The storm outside begins to settle, the howling wind dropping to a low, mournful sigh that sweeps around the heavy stone walls of the church. Inside, the oil lamps are turned down low to save fuel. The great, vaulted space is bathed in a warm, honey-colored light. The shadows stretch long and soft across the floor. The snowflakes still drift down through the broken roof, landing on the stones with the faintest of whispers, melting quietly away. The nurses find small wooden chairs or rest against the sturdy stone pillars, closing their eyes for just a few precious minutes, wrapping their woolen shawls tightly around their shoulders. They sit in the quiet, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of the heavy blankets covering the sleeping men. They are surrounded by the sleeping sons of distant mothers, all breathing together in the warm, dim light. The uniforms do not matter here. The lines on the grand maps drawn by the generals mean absolutely nothing inside these walls. There is only the fragile, beautiful truth of shared humanity huddled together against the vast, indifferent cold. Look at the faces of the sleeping men. The lines of worry, the sharp edges of fear, have all been smoothed away by the warmth and the quiet. They are dreaming of home. They are walking through orchards in bloom, sitting by warm iron stoves, listening to the ticking clocks in their own hallways. The color of the melting ice is not a thing to fear. It is just the world softening. It is the hard edges dissolving into water. It is the slow, inevitable return of grace. The long, terrible day is over. The church stands firm, its ancient stones holding back the winter, keeping the darkness at bay. You are safe here in the warm, golden shadows. There is nothing to worry about until the morning, and the morning is a long, long way away. Listen to the quiet breathing. Listen to the soft, rhythmic ticking of the watch. Let the warmth of the heavy blanket sink into your weary bones. You do not have to walk anymore. You do not have to carry the heavy pack. Let the gentle night fold over you. Let the soft, melting snow wash away the memory of the cold. Hush now. Rest your heavy eyes. All is peaceful here. All is well. Sleep. Just sleep. When the snow falls thick enough in the deep dark, the world entirely forgets its own shape. Listen to the sound of the blizzard. It is not an angry roar, but a vast, sweeping hush that swallows the plains whole. As the pale, bruised twilight fades into the heavy velvet of the winter night, the horizon simply vanishes. The sky and the earth become one swirling, endless ocean of white and charcoal gray. There is no up, and there is no down. There are no roads to follow, no trees to mark the way, no stars to guide the lost. The great maps, with their carefully drawn lines and shifting borders, have been completely erased by the wind. Out here, in the heart of the storm, the war has stopped making sense. The front lines have dissolved into a chaotic, drifting mist. The carefully ordered columns of men have been broken apart by the sudden, terrifying whiteout. Now, there are only small, scattered clusters of shivering souls, wandering blindly through the dark, placing one heavy boot in front of the other, hoping desperately that they are walking toward the dawn. Imagine the absolute isolation of this frozen world. A squad of 7 men moves through the drifts. They walk in a single, tight file. The man in front holds his hand up, shielding his eyes from the biting, stinging needles of ice, though there is nothing to see. The man behind him grips the heavy canvas belt of the leader, and the man behind him does the same. They are tethered together in the blinding dark, a fragile chain of human life drifting through the void. If one were to let go, he would be swallowed by the snow in an instant, disappearing forever into the white wind. They do not speak. The cold steals the words straight from their lungs, freezing them in the air before they can even be heard. Instead, they retreat inward. When the body is pushed to the absolute limits of its endurance, when the cold seeps deep into the marrow of the bone, the mind creates its own warmth. It builds a quiet room behind closed eyes, a place where the storm cannot reach. One of the men in the center of the chain, a baker from a small valley town, is walking with his eyes half closed. His eyelashes are heavy with thick beads of ice, but in his mind, he is not in the freezing steppe. He is standing in the doorway of his father's barn. It is late evening, and the air smells of sweet hay and warm, damp earth. In his memory, his younger brother is holding a beautiful, brass lantern. The glass is slightly smudged with soot, but the flame inside burns with a rich, golden light. It casts a warm, flickering glow against the wooden walls, pushing back the dark. The baker holds onto that memory with everything he has. He carries that golden light in the center of his chest. It is his own private lantern in the blizzard, a fragile, beautiful spark that keeps his heart beating, keeping the freezing numbness at bay. He remembers the warmth of the glass beneath his fingers. He remembers the sound of his brother's laugh, a soft, easy sound that feels like a heavy woolen blanket wrapped around his shivering shoulders. He reaches his mittened hand up to his breast pocket, patting the stiff, frozen fabric of his coat. Beneath the wool, wrapped in oilcloth, is a letter from that very brother. He has read it so many times he knows the shape of every single word. "We are keeping the hearth fire burning high," the letter says. "The dog sleeps on the rug, and he dreams of you. We are waiting. The light is always on." He repeats the words softly, a silent, rhythmic chant matching the crunch of his boots in the deep snow. The light is always on. The light is always on. As the squad pushes forward, the wind suddenly drops for a brief, breathless moment. The swirling vortex of snow parts, just slightly, like a curtain blowing in a draft. And there, emerging from the gray gloom, are shadows. Another line of men is walking toward them. They are moving just as slowly, just as heavily. For a heartbeat, the baker's squad freezes. They stop dead in the snow. The figures ahead stop as well. They are only a few yards apart, standing face to face in the middle of the lonely, frozen ocean. Through the falling snow, the baker can see them clearly. They wear different coats. The shapes of their helmets are different. These are the men they have been chasing, and the men who have been chasing them. These are the phantoms from the other side of the map. In the warm rooms of the distant headquarters, this is where the clash should happen. This is where the rifles should be raised, where the shouting should break the silence of the night. But out here, in the crushing, magnificent weight of the blizzard, the rifles feel like nothing more than useless blocks of freezing iron and dead wood. The men's hands are too numb to find the triggers. Their bodies are too hollowed out by the cold to summon even a single drop of anger. They look at each other through the swirling white flakes. The baker sees a boy on the other side, wrapped in a captured, tattered gray blanket, his face entirely covered by a woolen scarf, save for his eyes. And in those eyes, the baker sees his own exact reflection. He sees the same profound, bottomless exhaustion. He sees the exact same desperate longing for a warm fire and a quiet room. He sees a brother, far from home, just trying to survive the night. The true enemy is not the man wearing the other coat. The true enemy is the vast, indifferent cold. It is the wind that wants to bury them all indiscriminately under the frost. Slowly, deliberately, the leader of the baker's squad takes a step to the side, sinking deep into a fresh drift, making room on the invisible path. The leader of the opposing squad gives a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A slow dip of a frosted helmet. They begin to walk again. They pass each other in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, close enough to hear the squeak of stiff leather and the ragged, shallow breathing of their supposed enemies. They brush past one another like ghosts, phantoms moving through a shared nightmare. Not a single word is spoken. Not a single hand is raised in anger. It is a profound, beautiful moment of absolute grace. In the deepest, darkest heart of the Winter War, the sheer frailty of human life has forced a quiet, unspoken peace. They are all just shivering boys, terrified of the dark, and they refuse to add any more sorrow to a night that is already so incredibly heavy. The baker watches the last man of the other squad drift past him. The man turns his head slightly, their eyes meeting for a fraction of a second. There is no hatred there. There is only a mutual, silent understanding. Keep walking. Do not lie down. May you find your way home. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, the shadows are swallowed by the storm. The wind howls again, closing the curtain of snow, erasing their footprints instantly. It is as if they were never there at all. The baker turns his face back into the wind and follows the man in front of him. A strange, comforting warmth blossoms in his chest. It is the warmth of shared mercy. He realizes that they are not entirely alone out here in the void. Even the ghosts in the snow share the same fragile, beating human heart. As the deepest hours of the night set in, the blizzard finally begins to soften its terrible roar. The squad stumbles upon a deep depression in the earth, a crater hidden beneath the drifts. It is a small sanctuary, a place where the wind merely whispers over their heads instead of tearing at their coats. They slide down into the bowl of snow, collapsing together in a tight, huddled circle. They pull their canvas shelter halves over their heads, creating a small, dark tent against the falling flakes. They press their backs and shoulders together, pooling the tiny, flickering embers of their body heat, trying to keep each other alive. Underneath the canvas, in the pitch black, the baker closes his eyes. He reaches for his pocket one last time, resting his numb hand over the letter from his brother. He pictures the lantern again. He imagines its golden light spilling out across the wooden floorboards of the barn, illuminating the gentle, dusty air. He imagines his brother turning the small brass knob, bringing the flame up higher, casting a warm, protective circle of light into the cold evening. All around him, the other men are doing the same. They are holding up their own invisible lanterns. A mother's smile. The smell of baking bread. The soft, gentle ticking of a hallway clock. The memory of a sweetheart's hand resting softly in their own. These are the lights that guide them through the longest night. These are the small, quiet flames that the winter wind can never, ever extinguish. Listen to the soft, rhythmic breathing of the men in the dark. It is a slow, peaceful sound, blending with the gentle shushing of the snow falling on the canvas above. The ghosts have passed in the night. The war has been left behind in the swirling white void. There is only this small, quiet space, and the beautiful, enduring warmth of the memories they hold so tightly. You do not need to walk any further tonight. The storm is passing over you. The heavy darkness is a blanket, keeping you hidden, keeping you safe. Let the golden light of the lantern fill your mind. Let it warm your tired hands and your aching chest. The morning will come, soft and bright, but for now, there is only the peaceful, deep rest of the winter night. Hush now. Listen to the quiet snow. Close your eyes, and let the gentle light guide you into sleep. Just sleep. A house remembers the sound of war long after the guns have gone quiet. Look out at the horizon, to the place where the endless white steppe meets the bruised and heavy sky. There, rising from the snow like the broken teeth of an ancient comb, are the chimneys and shattered rooftops of the great city. This is the edge of Kharkov. It is a place that has already seen too much. The snow here is not the pure, pristine white of the deep plains. It is dusted with the pale, red powder of pulverized brick and the gray ash of old, long-forgotten fires. The city has been fought over, claimed and reclaimed, a weary prize passed back and forth in the bitter, indifferent cold. For a few precious weeks, the people who live on these battered outskirts thought the storm had finally blown past them forever. They had swept the broken glass from their doorsteps. They had patched their roofs with scavenged tin and old canvas. They had dared to light their stoves, letting thin, brave ribbons of smoke rise into the freezing air. They had dared to hope that the coming spring would bring only melting ice, and not more iron. But the winter wind is a fickle thing. It has turned in the dark, and it is bringing the shadows back. It begins not as a sound, but as a feeling. It is a low, rhythmic vibration that creeps through the frozen crust of the earth. It travels up through the stone foundations of the houses, shivering through the wooden floorboards, rattling the fragile teacups that sit on the kitchen tables. In a small, half-ruined cottage at the very edge of the city, an old grandfather clock stands against the wall. Its pendulum swings with a steady, comforting tick-tock. But as the vibration grows, the glass case of the clock begins to hum softly in sympathy with the earth. The family inside the cottage stops what they are doing. A mother, her hands covered in the white flour of the meager bread she is kneading, freezes in place. A grandfather, sitting near the stove mending a leather boot, slowly lowers his hands to his lap. The two young children, who had been playing quietly with carved wooden blocks on the rug, look up, their eyes wide and questioning in the dim light. They know this feeling. They know the deep, terrible rumble of the heavy tracks returning from the horizon. It is the sound of the tide coming back in. No one screams. No one weeps loudly. The grief is too deep, too familiar for noise. There is only a profound, heartbreaking silence that fills the small room, heavier than the cold air outside. It is the silence of acceptance, the quiet resignation of people who must bend once again to a storm they cannot control. The mother wipes her flour-covered hands on her coarse apron. She takes a slow, shaky breath, fighting to keep her chin steady, and walks to the heavy wooden chest in the corner of the room. It is time to go. Again. There is a small wooden cart waiting in the shed out back. It is a frail thing, built of mismatched boards and resting on two wobbly, iron-rimmed wheels. It is not meant to carry the weight of an entire life, but tonight, it must. The packing is a ritual of quiet, desperate love. They move through the dim, candle-lit room like shadows, choosing what to save from the approaching winter storm. When you can only carry what you can pull, the value of things changes completely. Heavy pots and fragile china are left behind in the cupboards. Instead, the mother reaches for the thickest, heaviest wool blankets. She folds them with gentle, precise care, smoothing the creases with her palms, imagining how they will wrap around her children in the freezing dark. The grandfather moves to a small wooden shelf above the stove. His hands tremble slightly, the knuckles swollen with arthritis and the cold. He reaches for a small, tin box. Inside are not coins or jewels, but a stack of old, brittle letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, and a single, sepia-toned photograph of his late wife. He traces her face with his thumb, a feather-like touch, before slipping the tin box into the deep inside pocket of his heavy coat. He will carry her over his beating heart. He will not leave her to the war. The children know without being told. The older girl, a quiet child with dark, watchful eyes, helps her little brother into his thick winter coat, buttoning it all the way up to his chin. She takes his small, woolen mittens from the warming rack above the stove and pulls them gently over his small hands. "Where are we going, Anya?" the little boy whispers, his voice trembling slightly in the quiet room. "We are going for a walk in the snow," the older sister whispers back, her voice a soft, soothing melody designed to banish his fear. "We are going to find a new place to sleep, far away from the loud noises. It is a journey, little bird. You must hold my hand very tightly." The mother brings the last bundle out to the cart. It is a sack of dried oats and the loaf of bread she had just been baking, still warm and wrapped in a clean linen cloth. The smell of the warm yeast fills the freezing air, a heartbreaking reminder of the domestic peace they are abandoning. She places it carefully in the center of the cart, surrounded by the heavy blankets. They stand in the doorway of their home for one final moment. The house is dark now. The single candle has been snuffed out. The grandfather clock still ticks in the shadows, marking time for a family that is no longer there. The mother rests her bare hand on the wooden doorframe. She knows every scratch on this wood, every draft that comes through the window, every creak of the floorboards. It is a poor house, battered and bruised, but it was their sanctuary. She leaves a silent, weeping piece of her heart within its walls. She pulls the heavy door shut. It clicks into place with a quiet, final sound. The grandfather takes the two wooden handles of the cart. He bows his head, bracing his tired shoulders against the weight, and begins to pull. The iron wheels squeak softly in protest against the packed snow. Squeak. Crunch. Squeak. Crunch. It is the sad, slow music of the displaced. They walk out onto the road that leads away from the city. And as they emerge from the shadows of their street, they realize they are not alone. The road is slowly filling with people. They are a river of dark silhouettes moving quietly against the white snow. Other families, pulling other carts, carrying bundles on their backs, holding tightly to the hands of their children. They are the civilians, the innocent bystanders caught in the grand, sweeping maneuvers of the map, retreating once more into the vast, unforgiving steppe. There is no panic in this procession. There is only the numb, exhausted endurance of people who have been pushed to the very edge of the world. They walk with their heads down, leaning into the wind. Sometimes, a cart hits a deep rut in the ice and tilts dangerously. Without a word, the shadow of a neighbor steps out of the line, puts a heavy shoulder against the wood, and helps to right it. A shared nod in the dark. A quiet hand lifting a burden for just a moment. These are the small, invisible acts of heroism that never make it into the history books. It is not the courage to charge a line, but the profound courage to simply keep walking. The courage to wrap a child in a blanket. The courage to help a stranger push a broken cart through the snow. Behind them, the rumble of the returning armies grows just a fraction louder. The vibrations in the earth become more insistent. The edge of the ruined city is preparing to swallow the storm once again. The empty houses stand like silent sentinels, waiting for the shadows to fall over them. But do not look back at the city. Look at the people walking away. Look at the mother walking beside her children, her hand resting protectively on the edge of the wooden cart. In her pocket, she carries a small, smooth stone she picked up from her front step. A piece of her home, hard and enduring, something she can hold onto in the dark. Look at the grandfather, pulling the cart with a strength born entirely of love. He does not feel the ache in his knees or the biting wind on his face. He only feels the weight of the photograph against his chest, and the profound, beautiful need to keep his family safe. The snow begins to fall, a gentle, sweeping curtain of white that drifts down from the night sky. It lands on their shoulders, on the bundles in the carts, on the heavy woolen hats of the children. It is a quiet, hushing snow. It covers the tracks of the iron wheels almost as soon as they are made, a silent erasure of their painful journey. The wind whistles low over the plains, a mournful, sweeping lullaby. It whispers to the tired families, telling them to hold on, telling them that the night is vast, but it is not endless. In the dark, the mother reaches out and takes the hand of her little girl, who is holding tightly to the hand of her little brother. A chain of warmth. A chain of love moving through the freezing void. "Are we going very far, Mama?" the little girl whispers, her voice muffled by her thick scarf. "Just a little further," the mother replies softly, squeezing her hand. "Just until we cannot hear the thunder anymore. We will find a quiet place to sleep. I promise you." They walk on, disappearing slowly into the whiteout, a small cluster of beating hearts braving the winter. The ruined city fades into the dark behind them, its broken rooftops swallowed by the falling snow. Let the armies shift in the distance. Let the heavy iron rumble across the frozen earth. Here, on this lonely road, there is only the quiet, beautiful strength of a family moving forward. They carry the hearth fire within them, a light of love and resilience that no winter wind can ever put out. Listen to the soft crunch of the boots in the snow. Listen to the gentle, rhythmic squeak of the wooden wheel. It is a rhythm of survival. It is a lullaby of endurance. The night is cold, but they are together. Wrap the heavy blanket of the dark around you. Rest your thoughts. Send a quiet wish out into the snow for the families walking in the dark. Let the gentle wind soothe away the worries of your own day. Hush now. The city is far behind them. They are walking toward the dawn. Sleep. Just sleep. To walk backward through your own memory is a very quiet, very heavy thing. The columns of men are no longer marching across the wide, empty steppe. The vast, unbroken horizon of the plains has slowly closed in around them, replaced by the jagged, broken silhouettes of stone and twisted iron. This is the city. They have returned to the broad avenues and the narrow alleys they left behind when the world was a different color. Now, it is a landscape painted entirely in shades of frost, ash, and the pale, bruised violet of the winter twilight. The wind moves differently here. Out on the plains, it sweeps continuously, an endless, rushing ocean of air. But in the hollowed-out city, the wind winds through the broken buildings. It whistles softly through shattered window frames and sighs down the empty, shadowed alleyways. It sounds like the city itself is breathing, a slow, rattling exhale from a sleeping, wounded giant. The snow has drifted incredibly high against the brick walls, softening the harsh edges of the destruction, turning the piles of rubble into gentle, rolling white hills. The soldiers walk right down the center of the wide boulevards. Their heavy felt boots crunch softly on the snow-packed cobblestones, a steady, hypnotic rhythm that echoes faintly off the ruined facades. They are moving very slowly. It is not just the profound exhaustion of the long march that weighs down their steps. It is a deep, eerie sense of recognition. They know these streets. They remember the shape of that collapsed bakery on the corner. They remember the elegant wrought iron fence around the city park, even though half of it is now entirely buried under the heavy drifts. A soldier named Lucas pauses by a grand, ruined archway. The intricate stonework is chipped and scarred, but he knows its curve by heart. He leans his thick, mittened hand against the cold stone. Months ago, in a season that feels like it belongs to another lifetime entirely, he rested his back against this exact same wall. Back then, the air was terribly warm, and the sky was thick with the gray smoke of summer fires. He remembers sharing a dented metal canteen of warm water with a dear friend right on this spot, wiping the sweat and dust from his brow. Now, Lucas stands in the bitter, silent cold, wiping the thick frost from his own eyelashes. His friend is long gone, lost to the vastness of the war, and Lucas is entirely alone with the memory. He closes his tired eyes, and for just a fleeting, beautiful moment, he can almost hear the ghost of his friend's laughter echoing softly down the frozen street. It is a warm sound in a freezing world. Lucas pats the stone gently, a silent, reverent greeting to the past, and slowly continues his walk down the avenue. Further down the street, the men step carefully over the remains of what used to be a bustling neighborhood post office. The walls have completely crumbled, spilling a river of frozen, unsent letters out into the deep snow. They look like fallen autumn leaves, pale and delicate, perfectly preserved in the clear ice. A young medic named Elias halts in the rubble. He kneels down, the snow soaking instantly into the knees of his trousers. He takes off his heavy right glove, his bare, trembling fingers reaching out to brush against a piece of pale blue paper half buried in the frost. The ink is slightly smeared, blurred by the moisture of the snow, but he can still clearly make out the delicate, looping cursive handwriting. It is a letter from a mother, written to a daughter who had moved away to the city. Elias traces the words softly, mouthing them into the cold, silent air. "My sweet girl," he reads, his voice a barely audible whisper. "The garden is yielding so many beautiful tomatoes this year. I am canning them in the heavy glass jars you brought me for my birthday. I hope you are wearing your thick woolen coat when you walk by the river in the evenings. The winter can be so biting, and you always catch a chill so easily. Please try to come home for the winter festival. I have saved a large jar of sweet peach preserves just for you, tucked away in the back of the pantry." Elias holds the fragile, freezing paper incredibly carefully in his hands. It is a piece of a world that simply no longer exists. It is a tiny, frozen heartbeat of love, interrupted by the great storm of the war. He does not throw the letter back into the rubble. He folds it neatly, matching the original creases, and places it deep in the inside pocket of his heavy tunic, right against his chest. It feels deeply important to carry it with him. It feels like a quiet promise to the universe to remember that this ruined city was once a place of sweet peach preserves, of warm coats, and of mothers worrying for their daughters, not just a place of stone and ice. As the men drift further into the labyrinth of the avenues, the silence of the city settles over them like a heavy, protective blanket. In a ruined apartment building, where the entire front wall has been sheared away like a child's dollhouse laid open to the street, an older soldier stops and looks up. There, on the second floor, the wooden floorboards are sagging dangerously, threatening to give way at any moment. But sitting perfectly undisturbed on a small, intact brick mantelpiece is a child's toy. It is a small, knitted woolen bear, missing one of its shiny button eyes, wearing a faded red ribbon tied clumsily around its neck. The soldier, a man with a graying beard and a heavy, deeply tired slouch, stares up at the little bear. His eyes soften, the hard lines of his face melting away in the dim light. He remembers standing in a warm, bright parlor, buying a little bear almost exactly like that one for his own grandson. He remembers handing it to the boy by the soft, golden light of a Christmas tree, hearing the sudden, joyous intake of breath. The older soldier slowly, deliberately unslings his heavy rifle from his aching shoulder. He does not use it as a weapon. He reaches up, using the long, smooth wooden stock of the rifle to gently, carefully nudge the edge of the mantle. With infinite tenderness, he coaxes the little knitted bear forward, catching it safely in his large, calloused hands as it tumbles softly down from the second floor. He brushes the fine, red brick dust from the bear's knitted ears. He holds it for a long moment, a talisman of profound innocence in a world that has forgotten what innocence means. He looks around the ruined street, finding a relatively clean, dry ledge near a surviving doorway, perfectly sheltered from the biting wind. He sets the little bear down carefully on the ledge, arranging its small, woolen arms. It is a tiny, secret comfort arranged in the ruins. It is a silent, desperate prayer for the child who had to leave it behind in the dark. As the afternoon finally completely fades, the bruised, deep purple light of the winter twilight settles heavily over the broken avenues. The shadows stretch incredibly long and deep across the snowdrifts, turning the white streets into a landscape of dark, jagged valleys. The soldiers know it is time to stop. They begin to filter into the hollow, safe spaces of the city. They find the deep basements and the old cellars, the dark, subterranean pockets where the terrible winds simply cannot reach them. They climb down the broken stone steps, leaving the vast, empty avenues to the ghosts and the falling snow. In one of these deep cellars, there are no grand, roaring fires tonight. The men are too exhausted to gather wood, and the smoke would be too dangerous anyway. There is only the incredibly faint, warm orange glow of a single, shielded oil lantern, casting long, flickering light against the damp, ancient brick walls. The men sit shoulder to shoulder on the hard earth, wrapped tightly in their heavy coats and whatever stolen, ragged blankets they could carry. The exhaustion of the march is so complete, so absolute, that it has pushed them entirely past the sensation of pain, leaving them in a strange state of floating, numb tranquility. They are a congregation of weary phantoms, haunting the basement of their own history. By the weak light of the lantern, Lucas pulls a small, leather-bound notebook from his canvas pack. His fingers are stiff and clumsy from the cold, but he uses his thumb to gently smooth out the wrinkled pages. He pulls a short stub of a pencil from his pocket. He writes very slowly, the lead scratching a quiet, rhythmic, incredibly soothing sound in the hushed, breathing room. "My dearest Elsa," he writes, his handwriting small and careful. "We have come back to the city tonight. It is so incredibly strange to be here again. It feels exactly like walking through a deep dream where everything is intimately familiar, but everything is entirely broken. The streets are perfectly quiet now. The snow has covered up all the terrible scars, making the world look soft and sleeping. Today, I stood on a street corner where I used to stand in the bright, warm sun. I felt like a ghost, wandering through the rooms of my own past life." He pauses, taking a slow, shaky breath of the cold cellar air. He closes his eyes, picturing her face. But then I remembered you, he continues, his hand moving with a sudden, renewed purpose. I remembered the exact way you look when you are sitting and reading by the window in our parlor. I remembered the way the afternoon light catches the loose strands of your hair. And suddenly, the cold didn't feel so sharp anymore. The ruins didn't feel so terrifying. You are my beautiful, heavy anchor in this vast, drifting world. Keep the lamp lit by the window for me, my love. I am walking toward it. Even in the dark, even through the snow, I am always walking toward you. He finishes the letter, blowing softly on the paper to clear away a tiny smudge of graphite. He closes the notebook, placing it carefully in his breast pocket, right next to his beating heart. He leans his heavy head back against the cold, solid stone wall of the cellar, pulling his thick woolen scarf all the way up over his nose, leaving only his tired eyes exposed to the dim light. All around him, the cellar is completely full of men doing the very same thing. They are finding their own anchors. They are closing their eyes and letting the gentle, irresistible current of their deepest memories carry them far away from the ruined city. They are traveling back to the warm, intact rooms of their homes, to the smells of baking bread and the sounds of familiar, loving voices. The city above them stands perfectly silent under the continuous, falling snow. The ghosts of the avenues have all finally gone to sleep. The frozen letters lie incredibly quiet in the deep drifts, and the little woolen bear keeps its lonely, brave watch on the dry ledge by the door. The wind hums a soft, mournful, beautiful lullaby through the empty window frames, a song for all the fragile things that were lost, and a song for the quiet, enduring men who are simply trying to find their way back to the light. Let the heavy, dark night wrap warmly around the broken buildings. Let the snow fall, pure and clean, smoothing out all the jagged edges of the tired world. You do not have to wander the cold avenues tonight. You are safely hidden away. You are warm in the dark. The long, impossible walk is paused, and the ghosts of the past are finally resting. Hush now. Listen to the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the men in the dark. Listen to the soft, gentle settling of the snow on the pavement far above. Close your eyes. Let the heavy, aching weariness completely fade away into the shadows. Let the deep peace of the winter night hold you. Sleep. Just sleep. There is a profound stillness that lives only in the very center of a broken city, hidden safely behind high walls of shattered stone. When you walk away from the wide, windswept avenues and step into the narrow, winding alleys of the city center, the sound of the world completely changes. The distant, muffled thunder of the shifting armies is swallowed by the heavy, brick facades. The howling wind loses its sharp edge, broken apart by the maze of old buildings, turning into nothing more than a soft, melodic sigh that sweeps gently through the empty window frames. It is a labyrinth of shadows and deep snow, a place where time seems to have simply stopped ticking. Moving through this quiet maze is a young man named Julian. He is a dispatcher, a runner of messages. In his heavy leather pouch, tucked securely beneath his thick, woolen coat, he carries small, folded pieces of paper. To the men in the warm rooms with their vast maps, these papers hold the very weight of the world. They carry the orders that shift the tides, the words that tell the shadows where to fall. But to Julian, they are just weightless scraps of paper. The only true weight he feels is the crushing, endless exhaustion in his bones, and the heavy drag of his frozen boots pulling through the deep, unbroken drifts. He does not run. The cold is too deep, the air too thin and sharp to draw quickly into the lungs. He moves in a slow, hypnotic, dreamlike trudge. Step. Breathe. Step. Breathe. He watches the small clouds of his own breath rise and dissipate into the pale, pearl-gray sky. He is entirely alone in the ruined streets, a solitary traveler navigating an ocean of white and charcoal. Julian ducks beneath a fallen wooden beam, his shoulder brushing against a wall of incredibly cold, rough brick. He steps through a jagged archway, leaving the alley behind, and enters an enclosed courtyard. The moment he crosses the threshold, a wave of absolute, heavy peace washes over him. The courtyard is a secret sanctuary, completely walled off from the rest of the ruined city. Before the winter and the war, this must have been a beautiful, hidden garden. Now, it is a perfectly preserved bowl of pure, untouched snow. The snow here has not been blackened by soot or trampled by heavy boots. It sparkles faintly in the dim light, a pristine, white blanket tucked gently around the sleeping earth. The acoustics of the high, stone walls dampen every echo. The silence here is not empty, it is thick, wrapping around Julian like a heavy, warm quilt. He stops walking. The rhythm of his journey pauses. He lets his heavy canvas bag slip slightly on his shoulder, his tired eyes slowly scanning the quiet space. In the very center of the courtyard, rising from the deep snow, is a statue. It is carved from pale, smooth stone, a classical figure of a woman draped in flowing robes. She was once holding a stone urn, pouring invisible water into a fountain that has long since frozen solid. The war has not entirely spared her. One of her graceful stone arms has been broken away, lost to the rubble. Her robes are chipped, and a dusting of fresh snow rests heavily on her gently bowed head. But her face remains perfectly intact. It is a face of profound, eternal serenity. Her stone eyes are lowered in quiet contemplation, completely unbothered by the cold, untouched by the fear that grips the living world. She has stood in this courtyard for 100 years, watching the snows come and go, watching the seasons change, holding her quiet peace. Julian walks slowly toward her, his boots making the softest, most delicate crunching sound in the virgin snow. He stops just a few feet away, entirely captivated by the calm of her expression. In a world where everything feels terribly fragile, where lives are blown away like dry leaves in the winter wind, the sheer, enduring weight of the stone is a beautiful, comforting thing. She does not shiver. She does not weep. She simply endures, holding her quiet grace in the freezing dark. Julian feels his knees tremble. The exhaustion he has been holding at bay finally catches up to him. He slowly sinks down, resting on the curved, snow-covered stone edge of the dry fountain, right at the feet of the statue. He leans his heavy head back, looking up into her serene face. He reaches up with a mittened hand and slowly, gently brushes the gathered snow from her remaining stone shoulder. It is a small, incredibly tender gesture. A moment of quiet communion between a tired, frightened boy and a piece of unfeeling rock. "You are so quiet," Julian whispers, his voice a soft, hoarse rasp that barely breaks the silence of the courtyard. "You don't have to carry anything. You just get to stay here and sleep." He pulls his glove off with his teeth, letting his bare, trembling hand rest against the frozen stone of her robes. The cold of the granite seeps into his skin, but it is a grounding, solid cold. It feels permanent. It feels safe. He closes his eyes, leaning closer to the stone. He reaches into the deep, inner pocket of his coat, bypassing the urgent military messages, and his fingers find a different piece of paper. It is a letter from his father. His father was a stonemason, a man with hands as rough as bark, perpetually dusted with the fine, white powder of cut marble and granite. Sitting in the quiet sanctuary of the courtyard, Julian unfolds the soft, worn paper. He doesn't need to read the words in the dim light, he has them memorized, carved into his own heart. "My dear son," the memory of his father's voice echoes warmly in his mind. "I look at the blocks of stone in my workshop, and I think of you out there in the vast world. Stone is a patient thing, Julian. It does not rush. It does not worry for tomorrow. It simply accepts the chisel, and it waits. When the world feels too loud, and the wind is blowing too hard, try to find the patience of the stone. Stand firm. Let the storm blow around you. Remember that beneath the ice, the earth is solid, and it will hold you up." Julian takes a slow, deep breath, inhaling the sharp, clean scent of the frost and the old, sleeping stone. The frantic, terrified beating of his heart begins to slow, matching the deep, unhurried rhythm of the quiet courtyard. The weight of the war, the desperate urgency of the messages in his pouch, the fear of the open avenues, it all simply melts away. For this one, beautiful, suspended moment in time, there is no battle. There is no winter. There is only a tired boy resting in a forgotten garden, watched over by a broken, gentle angel of stone. He imagines his father standing in his dusty workshop, the warm, golden sunlight streaming through the high windows, illuminating the floating motes of stone dust. He imagines the rhythmic, musical tink, tink, tink of the chisel and the hammer. He imagines the smell of strong black tea brewing on the small stove in the corner of the shop. The memories wrap around him, insulating his soul against the freezing air. He realizes that he is not just a runner in the snow. He is the son of a stonemason. He carries a piece of that solid, unbreakable strength inside himself. Julian opens his eyes and looks at the statue once more. The pale, pearl-gray sky above is beginning to darken, the heavy clouds turning the color of bruised lavender as the evening approaches. The snow begins to fall again, large, soft flakes that drift down like a gentle blessing over the courtyard. He watches a single snowflake land on the statue's stone cheek. It rests there for a moment, a tiny, perfect star, before slowly melting into a solitary, dark tear of water that runs down her serene face. "I have to go now," Julian whispers softly to the stone figure. "There are people waiting for the words I carry. But thank you. Thank you for the quiet." He slowly stands up, his muscles stiff and protesting against the cold. He carefully folds his father's letter and tucks it safely back inside his coat, right next to his heart. He pulls his thick woolen glove back onto his hand, flexing his fingers. He looks back at the door, the jagged archway that leads back out into the ruined, winding alleys. The war is still out there, waiting for him. The long walk is not over. But something has profoundly changed within him. He is no longer walking with the frantic, hollow fear of the hunted. He is walking with the heavy, patient endurance of the stone. He turns and begins to walk back through the deep, untouched snow of the garden. He leaves a single trail of footprints behind him, a quiet testament that a human heart found rest in this forgotten place. As he steps through the archway, he looks back over his shoulder one last time. The stone woman stands perfectly still in the falling snow, her head bowed in eternal, peaceful contemplation. The shadows of the evening are gathering around her, wrapping her in a soft, protective embrace. She will remain there, holding the quiet of the courtyard, long after the armies have gone, long after the snow has melted, a silent guardian of peace in a broken world. Julian steps out into the alleyway. The wind sighs gently down the narrow street, but it does not chill him as deeply as before. He carries the profound, heavy stillness of the courtyard within him now. He adjusts the leather pouch on his shoulder, ducks his chin into his thick scarf, and begins to walk. Step. Breathe. Step. Breathe. Let the heavy snow fall. Let it cover the ruined rooftops and the broken stone. The world is soft and quiet tonight. You do not need to carry the urgent messages. You do not need to worry about the path ahead. Find the quiet garden within your own mind. Find the heavy, peaceful weight of the stone. Let the frantic worries of the day simply melt away, dissolving into the gentle, drifting snow. There is a sanctuary waiting for you, a place where the wind cannot reach, where the shadows are warm and the silence is beautiful. Listen to the soft, rhythmic crunch of the footsteps fading into the distance. Listen to the gentle, shushing sound of the winter night settling over the earth. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow, matching the deep, unhurried turning of the world. You are safe here. You are anchored and held. Let the heavy, beautiful peace of the quiet courtyard fold over you. Hush now. Rest your tired mind. Sleep. Just sleep. The loudest sound in the world is the sudden, unexpected vanishing of the roar that you have lived inside for so very long. For weeks, the city has been a cacophony of iron against stone, a relentless, grinding pressure that vibrated in the teeth and rattled the very bones of the earth. But now, in this single, suspended hour, the machines have fallen silent. The heavy tracks have stopped their relentless churning, and the iron hammers of the artillery have finally been laid to rest. What remains is a silence so vast, so heavy, and so profoundly hollow that it feels as though the city itself has held its breath, waiting for a heartbeat that is slow to return. You can hear the snow falling. It is a soft, rhythmic shushing, like the brushing of a broom against the cobblestones. You can hear the low, mournful sigh of the wind as it weaves its way through the shattered ribs of the skyscrapers. It is a quiet that does not bring relief. Instead, it brings a weight, a deep, aching, hollow realization that washes over the men who stand amidst the ruins. They are the victors of the street, the men who have finally pushed the tide back and claimed the center of this battered, frozen place. But look at their faces. There is no triumph in their eyes. There is no joy in the weary, sagging set of their shoulders. There is only a profound, bottomless exhaustion, a tiredness that goes deeper than the muscles, deeper than the marrow, a tiredness of the very soul. They walk through the broken avenues like sleepwalkers who have wandered into a strange, dreamless land. They move past the smoldering remains of once elegant buildings, their boots crunching on the frozen debris. They do not talk. To speak would be to shatter the fragile, brittle silence that hangs over the city like a shroud. They simply exist in the quiet, their minds finally slowing down, finally stopping the frantic, desperate race for survival. In the center of a wide, snowy square, a soldier sits on the edge of a shattered stone fountain. His rifle is leaned against his knees, useless and forgotten, its cold metal coated in a fine, dusting layer of white. He is not a soldier anymore. He is just a man. He pulls his thick, woolen gloves from his hands, his fingers stiff and blue, and stares at his own palms. They are rough, dirty, and trembling. He remembers the hands of his father, the steady, rhythmic way he used to plane wood in his workshop. He remembers the feeling of the smooth, finished timber, the smell of the pine shavings, the warm, golden sun streaming through the dusty windows. He tries to touch his own fingers to his face, but he can barely feel the contact. The world feels distant, filtered through a thick, gray gauze of numbness. Is it over? A voice asks from the shadows behind him. The soldier turns his head slowly. Another man is standing there, leaning against a rusted lamppost. He wears the same dusty, frost-caked coat. They are men from opposite sides of the map, yet in the hollow silence of the city, they look identical. They are both simply hollowed-out shells of men, drained of everything but the most basic, aching need for peace. Yes, the soldier on the fountain whispers, his voice sounding thin and foreign in the vast, open space. It is over for today. The other man nods, a slow, heavy movement of his head. He does not reach for his weapon. He doesn't even look at the soldier on the fountain. He just looks up at the darkening, indifferent sky, watching the snowflakes tumble down. They stand there together, two ghosts in a graveyard of iron and stone, separated by everything that has passed, yet united by the profound, crushing realization that they are still here, and that the fighting has stopped. There is no hatred left. There is no anger. There is only the realization that they have been cast into this cold, broken place, and that they have both survived, and that now, there is nothing left to do but ache. They are aching for the people they left behind. They are aching for the warmth of a life that feels like it belonged to someone else, someone they used to know before the war began. Across the square, in the ruin of what was once a grand library, a young man sits on a pile of frozen, water-damaged books. He has found a small, leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and peeling from the cold. He opens it, the pages stiff and brittle, and by the faint, silvery light of the moon, he reads the last entry written by a stranger. The snow is coming down so hard, the diary says, in elegant, looping script. I have put the tea kettle on, and I am watching the garden turn white. I wonder if the winter will be very long this year. I hope we are all safe when the spring finally arrives. The soldier closes the diary. He does not know who wrote the words. He does not know if they ever got to drink that tea, or if they survived the long, bitter winter. But the words strike a chord deep within him, a resonance of shared, fragile humanity. He feels a sudden, sharp sting of tears, not from his own pain, but for the universal, aching vulnerability of everyone who has ever sat in a house and watched the winter arrive, wondering if they would be safe when the flowers finally bloomed. He carefully places the diary on a nearby shelf, an act of quiet, everyday reverence, as if returning a lost bird to its nest. He stands up and walks to the broken window, looking out over the city. It is a landscape of profound, hollow silence. The ruins are draped in white, the jagged edges softened, the scars of the struggle hidden beneath the gentle, falling snow. It is beautiful, in a terrible, heartbreaking way. It is the beauty of a world that has been utterly emptied of everything but the cold, indifferent sky and the quiet, settling frost. A few streets away, a group of soldiers has found the cellar of a damaged bakery. It is not warm, but it is sheltered, and it smells of old, stale yeast and dry wood. They lie on the dirt floor, shoulder to shoulder, their eyes staring up at the dark, low ceiling. They do not talk of the tactics. They do not talk of the victory. One man, his face a mask of exhaustion, reaches into his pocket and pulls out a crumpled photograph. He holds it up, though he cannot see the details in the dark. He knows every single line of it. He knows the way his wife smiles, the way she tilts her head, the way her dress flares out in the summer wind. "I am coming home," he whispers into the dark. It is not a promise to anyone. It is a whispered prayer to the universe. I am coming home, and I am going to stay there for the rest of my life. I am going to sit in the garden and listen to the birds. I am going to forget the sound of the wind in the ruins. I am going to forget the color of the snow. The others around him do not respond. They are all lost in their own, private sanctuaries. They are building their own mental gardens, their own warm parlors, their own quiet hallways where the clocks tick softly and the sun shines through the clean glass. They are trying to scrub the war from their minds, trying to find the people they used to be before they were soldiers, before they were ghosts haunting a broken city. This is the hollowness of the victory. It is the realization that to win the city is to stand in the middle of a graveyard, surrounded by the remnants of thousands of lives that were shattered in the pursuit of a goal that feels, in the quiet, utterly meaningless. The victory does not return the time they have lost. It does not return the softness of their hearts. It only leaves them standing in the cold, holding onto the wreckage, wondering how they will ever be able to walk away and rejoin a world that is still, perhaps, warm and whole. Outside, the snow continues its gentle, rhythmic work. It fills the craters. It blankets the rubble. It hides the broken glass and the twisted iron, returning the city to a state of absolute, blank neutrality. It is a forgiving snow. It does not judge the soldiers who stand in the squares, and it does not judge the buildings that have fallen. It simply blankets everything in a deep, peaceful white, whispering that the time for fighting is finished, and the time for sleeping has arrived. The silence of the city is a heavy, sacred thing. It is a silence that invites the weary to finally let go of the rifles, the maps, and the bitterness. It is a silence that invites them to remember the warmth of the tea kettle, the smell of the pine shavings, and the soft, steady hum of the parlor clock. Let the men rest. Let the city sleep beneath its protective, white quilt. The long, impossible struggle has reached its quiet end. There is nothing left to decide tonight, and there is nothing left to prove. The hearths are cold, but the memory of the fire remains, burning bright and steady in the center of their chests. Close your eyes, and let the hollow silence wrap around you, not as a weight, but as a balm, a soft, impenetrable buffer against the world. You are here, and you are breathing, and the long, terrible night is finally beginning to pass. Hush now. Listen to the gentle, shushing snow. Let the heavy weariness simply dissolve into the shadows. All is quiet. All is still. Sleep. Just sleep. The earth knows when the fighting has gone on for too long, and so it begins to weep, turning the hard, frozen world into a soft, yielding embrace. Listen closely to the landscape. The iron-hard grip of the winter is finally loosening, and with it, a profound, slow-motion transformation begins to take hold of the steppe. The blinding, brilliant white of the snow is beginning to gray at the edges. It is a slow, quiet surrender. The sun, climbing higher and warmer in the pale blue sky each day, is coaxing the frost from the soil, waking the sleeping earth from its long, icy hibernation. There is a sound to this transformation. It is not the sudden crash of battle or the heavy rumble of engines. It is a soft, melodic dripping. Drip. Drip. 1,000 tiny, liquid secrets leaking from the eaves of ruined houses, from the sagging branches of skeletal trees, from the jagged, melting piles of rubble. The world is turning to water. The frozen, solid ground is waking up, stretching its weary limbs, and as it does, it dissolves into the Rasputitsa, the great, impassable thaw. For the soldiers, this is a moment of strange, enforced stillness. The massive, churning machines that had roared across the plains, tearing through the snow and ice, are suddenly halted. Their heavy tracks sink deep into the deepening, thickening slush, becoming hopelessly mired in a sea of dark, hungry mud. It is as if the earth has reached up with its own clay hands, gently but firmly telling the armies that there will be no more movement today. The war is forced to pause, caught in the thick, wet, clinging grip of the spring mud. Follow a young soldier named Victor as he steps out of a drafty, abandoned barn in the early morning light. He takes one step, and his heavy boot immediately disappears into a viscous, chocolate-colored slurry of melting snow and wet soil. He has to pull with all his might to free his foot, the mud making a soft, sucking sound, a persistent, playful protest. He laughs, a short, breathy sound that surprises even himself. He hasn't laughed in so long that the motion feels strange, like a word in a language he had almost forgotten how to speak. He looks around at his comrades. They are all standing in the mud, their coats stained with the dark, heavy clay, their faces smudged with the wet earth. They aren't trying to pull their vehicles out. They aren't trying to march. They are simply standing still, leaning against the sides of their stalled trucks, looking out at the landscape. They have realized that the mud is absolute. It is a barrier that no amount of iron or fire can break. And in that realization, there is a sudden, unexpected sense of freedom. The mud has stopped the world. The mud has forced them to sit down. Victor walks over to a patch of ground near a stone wall where the snow has already completely receded. He kneels down, his knees sinking into the soft, yielding dampness. He brushes away the top layer of decaying leaves and wet twigs, and there, peeking through the mud, is a tiny, vibrant spear of green. A shoot of grass. The first, fragile promise of life. He reaches out, his fingers shaking slightly, and touches the damp earth around the blade of grass. It is not cold. It is alive. It is pulsing with the deep, quiet, inevitable power of the spring. He feels a sudden, sharp ache in his chest, a longing so intense it almost makes him dizzy. He thinks of the garden back in his village, of the way the soil feels when it is ready for the first planting, of the way his mother's hands look when she is working the earth, planting the rows of dark, rich seeds. He sits there for a long time, just watching the mud, watching the water pool in the hollows, watching the earth begin to breathe again. He is not a soldier here. He is not a part of the iron machine of the war. He is just a man, kneeling in the dirt, witnessing the slow, beautiful, unstoppable return of the spring. A few yards away, an older sergeant is sitting on an overturned wooden crate, cleaning his boots with a rusted knife. He moves with a slow, meditative focus. As he scrapes the thick, wet clay from the leather, he looks up and sees Victor kneeling in the mud. He smiles, a slow, gentle expression that reaches his eyes. The mud is the only thing that can keep us still, the sergeant says, his voice a low, raspy whisper. It's a gift, really. A few days of peace. A few days where we don't have to look at the horizon and wonder what's waiting for us. Victor looks back at him and nods. It smells like life, he whispers. It does, the sergeant agrees, tapping his knife against the crate. It smells like the end of the frost. It smells like the earth is cleaning itself. Burying the old, preparing for the new. He is right. As the mud deepens, it seems to perform a quiet, sacred act of burial. It flows into the ruts of the tracks, it fills the empty shell casings, it covers the discarded scraps of metal and the shattered remnants of the struggle. It is as if the earth itself is ashamed of the scars, and is working to heal them, covering the evidence of the violence beneath a layer of rich, wet, nourishing soil. The mud is a blanket, thick and concealing, tucking the past away into the dark, quiet earth, where it can finally be forgotten. In the afternoon, the rain begins to fall. It is a soft, persistent, misty rain that hangs in the air, blurring the edges of the world. It turns the landscape into a watercolor painting, all muted greens and earthy browns, dissolving the sharp lines of the ruins into a soft, organic blur. The soldiers retreat into the warmth of the houses and the barns, where they build small, dry shelters from scavenged tin and tarps. They spend the day doing things that have nothing to do with the war. They sit and mend their clothes, using needles made from wire and thread pulled from the seams of their own coats. They read old, tattered books they found in the rubble, passing them from hand to hand until the pages are soft and worn thin. One soldier, a quiet man with sad, gentle eyes, sits in the corner of a ruined house, carefully carving a small, wooden boat from a piece of soft pine. He works by the light of the rain-streaked window, his knife moving with infinite, patient care. He doesn't look up when the others talk. He is entirely focused on the shape of the hull, on the curve of the bow, on the delicate, tapering mast. He is building something that is meant to float. He is building something that is meant to move with the water, to drift on a river, to travel to a place that is safe and calm. It is his way of protesting the stillness of the mud, his way of dreaming of the flow of the water, the return of the life that moves. He finishes the boat and sets it on the windowsill. It is a simple, beautiful thing, a small, wooden vessel of hope sitting in the middle of a broken house. As the evening settles in, the rain turns into a gentle, rhythmic patter against the roofs. The soldiers lie on the floors, wrapped in their blankets, listening to the sound of the water. It is a peaceful, repetitive music. It is the sound of the earth washing itself clean. In the cellar of a partially destroyed house, a young man named Andrei lies awake, listening to the water dripping from a crack in the ceiling into a metal pail. Plink. Plink. It is a steady, reassuring count. He has a piece of paper in his lap, a letter he has been writing for 3 days, stopping and starting as the mood takes him. Dearest Mama, he writes in the dim, gray light. The spring has finally broken. The world is nothing but mud and rain, but it is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. We are stopped, Mama. We cannot move. We are just sitting here, watching the grass start to grow. It is as if the world has been forced to take a breath. I am thinking of you, and I am thinking of the garden. I am thinking of the way the rain sounds on our roof, the way it makes the house feel so warm and so safe. He pauses, listening to the rain on the stones outside. I am tired, Mama. I am so tired of the iron, and the cold, and the fear. I just want to be home. I want to walk in the mud of our own fields. I want to help you with the planting. I want to be a man again, not a ghost moving through the ruins. Please, keep the door unlocked for me. I am coming home, Mama. I am just waiting for the earth to let me go. He puts the pen down and closes his eyes, letting the sound of the rain carry him into a dream. In his dream, he is walking through his mother's garden. The soil is dark and rich, and he is pressing seeds into the earth, his hands covered in the good, clean mud. There is no war. There is no iron. There is only the rain, and the seeds, and the promise of the harvest. The night deepens, wrapping the city in a soft, wet blanket of dark. The rain continues, a slow, gentle pulse that flows through the streets and the alleys, washing away the dust and the ash. The mud settles, firm and quiet, holding the earth in its heavy, nurturing grip. Nature has reclaimed the battlefield. It has buried the scars, it has stilled the machines, and it has reminded the weary men that they are part of the earth, not masters of it. It has given them a moment of profound, necessary pause. A moment to breathe. A moment to remember who they are beneath the coats and the uniforms. Listen to the soft, rhythmic rain. Listen to the gentle movement of the melting water. The earth is weeping, yes, but it is also washing away the past, preparing the ground for something new. Let the mud hold you. Let the rain soothe your tired mind. You are part of this world, this soft, waking, living world, and you are being held in its slow, quiet embrace. The battle is far away. The machines are sunk deep in the clay. There is nothing to do but rest and wait for the green shoots to push through the soil. Hush now. Listen to the rain on the roof. Let the deep peace of the spring earth wrap around you. Rest your heavy heart. Sleep. Just sleep. The stars do not know of the lines we draw in the snow. They only watch with a cold and ancient light as the earth slowly turns toward the morning. Listen to the deep, velvet silence that has settled over the steppe. The long weeks of thunder and the frantic rhythm of the march have finally ebbed away, leaving behind a world that is perfectly still, held in the quiet embrace of a clear, freezing night. The horizon, once a place of fire and shifting shadows, is now a soft, dark curve under a sky crowded with a million diamond-bright lights. The air is sharp and clean, smelling of nothing but frost and the distant, lonely scent of wood smoke drifting from 100 hidden stoves. Down in the narrow, winding trenches and the deep, earthen dugouts, the men have finally found a moment to let go. The maps have been folded away. The grease pencils are still. The heavy iron machines sit like sleeping beasts in the shadows, their engines cold, their metal skin covered in a delicate, sparkling layer of rime. For this one night, the world belongs not to the generals or the empires, but to the quiet breathing of the weary. In a small dugout carved into the side of a gentle hill, a soldier named Matthias sits alone by a small iron stove. The fire inside is dying, the wood settled into a bed of soft, glowing rubies. He watches the fading embers, mesmerized by the way the light dances and pulses in the dark. To Matthias, these embers are a tiny, contained sun, a small piece of the hearth he carries with him through the winter. He does not think of the city they have retaken, or the ground they have gained. He thinks only of the warmth. He thinks of the way the light looks when it catches the copper kettle in his mother's kitchen. He reaches out his hands, the skin red and cracked from the wind, and holds them close to the iron. The heat is a gentle, persistent pressure against his palms. In this moment, the war is 1,000,000 miles away. It is a story told in a different language. Here, in the hollow of the earth, there is only the rhythm of his own heart and the soft, musical crackle of the cooling wood. Beside him, his friend Peter is already asleep, wrapped so tightly in his heavy woolen blankets that he looks like a cocoon of gray shadows. Peter's breathing is slow and rhythmic, a peaceful, untroubled sound. In his sleep, Peter is no longer a soldier. He is a boy again, walking through a field of tall, golden wheat in the height of summer. He can feel the sun warming his shoulders. He can hear the hum of the bees and the distant, melodic ringing of a church bell calling the village to prayer. He is safe. He is whole. He is home. This is the secret life of the front lines at night. While the world above is scarred by wire and iron, the world beneath the earth is a vast, beautiful landscape of dreams. Thousands of men, huddled in the dark, are traveling back to the places they love. They are sitting at dinner tables. They are holding the hands of their sweethearts. They are walking through orchards and forests, through gardens and quiet hallways. The night is a bridge that carries them across the frozen plains, returning them to the people they used to be before the world turned gray. Matthias pulls a small, worn leather pouch from his pocket. He does not open it to look for ammunition or tobacco. He reaches inside and pulls out a single, smooth wooden button. It is a small thing, lost from his sister's coat years ago, which he found and kept as a talisman. He rubs the smooth surface with his thumb, a repetitive, soothing motion. He remembers the day she lost it, a bright, windy afternoon in autumn when they were running through the fallen leaves. He remembers the sound of her laughter, a clear, bell-like ring that cut through the crisp air. He closes his eyes and holds that sound in his mind, letting it wash away the memory of the heavy guns and the screaming wind. He picks up a small stub of a pencil and a piece of paper that has been folded so many times it feels soft, like fabric. He writes slowly, his handwriting a gentle, looping cursive that flows across the page like a quiet stream. "My dear ones," he writes, the words appearing like magic in the dim glow of the embers. "The night is very beautiful here. The stars are so bright they seem to be whispering to the snow. We are resting now. The long walk is over for a while, and the air is quiet. I am sitting by a small fire, and I am thinking of the old oak tree in the yard. I wonder if the birds have returned to the birdhouse Father built. I dream of sitting on the porch and watching the sun go down over the fields. I am safe. I am warm. I am coming back to you, one heartbeat at a time." He finishes the letter and folds it carefully, tucking the wooden button inside the creases before slipping it into his breast pocket, right against his skin. He leans his head back against the cool, dark earth of the dugout wall and lets out a long, slow sigh of contentment. The exhaustion of the campaign is a heavy, velvet weight pulling at his eyelids, but it is not a painful weight anymore. It is the tiredness of a man who has reached the end of a long, difficult road and can finally see the light of the destination in the distance. Outside, the stars continue their silent, indifferent watch. They shine over the ruined city of Kharkov, over the abandoned tanks half buried in the drifts, over the frozen rivers and the vast, empty stretches of the steppe. To the stars, there are no victors. There are no enemies. There is only the earth, turning slowly in the dark, and the fragile, beautiful sparks of life that cling to its surface. The starlight is a gentle, silver wash that smooths out the jagged edges of the trenches, turning the battlefield into a landscape of soft shadows and pale, luminous light. The wind has died down to a faint, melodic hum, a lullaby sung by the universe to the tired world. It whispers through the dry grass and the skeletal branches of the trees, a song of endurance and quiet resilience. It tells the earth to rest. It tells the scars to heal. In a nearby dugout, a young medic is sharing the last of his sweetened tea with a man he was tending to just hours before. They sit in the shadows, the steam from their tin cups rising in slow, graceful spirals. They do not talk about the wounds or the medicine. They talk about the taste of the tea. They talk about the way the light looks on the snow. They offer each other small, quiet smiles, the shared warmth of the metal cups a profound and beautiful connection. In the dark, they are not a doctor and a patient, they are simply two human beings, finding a moment of grace in the middle of the night. The embers in Matthias's stove have finally faded to a soft, ashen gray. The last flicker of orange has vanished, leaving only a lingering, comfortable warmth in the small space. Matthias pulls his heavy greatcoat over his shoulders and settles down into the straw beside Peter. He adjusts his pack to serve as a pillow and closes his eyes. He does not think of the morning. He does not think of the orders that will come or the march that will begin again. He lets the quiet of the night fill his mind, washing away the colors of the war. He imagines himself standing at the gate of his family's farm. He can see the yellow light in the kitchen window. He can hear the soft lowing of the cows in the barn. He takes a deep, slow breath of the imaginary spring air, smelling the clover and the damp earth. He drifts into sleep, his breathing syncing with the breathing of the men all along the line. thousands of souls suspended in the dark, dreaming of peace. The steppe is quiet now. The long, impossible struggle for Kharkov has reached its final, reflective pause. The earth is holding its breath, waiting for the sun to rise, but for now, the night is absolute and kind. It is a blanket of stars and snow, a sanctuary for the weary and a temple for the dreaming. Let the fading embers grow cold. Let the heavy darkness hold you. There is no more fire tonight, and there is no more thunder. There is only the beautiful, aching silence of the stars and the soft, steady rhythm of a world that is trying to find its way back to the light. You have reached the end of the story. The long winter walk is done. The voices of the past are settled into the quiet earth, and the night is yours to keep. Wrap the heavy, warm blanket of the silence around you. Let your thoughts drift away like the white clouds of your breath, dissolving into the endless, peaceful sky. Hush now. The stars are watching. The earth is turning. All is calm. All is still. Sleep. Just sleep.